last Father's Day. Dad looked at Myron. Then he looked at Mickey and Emma. "You went outside?" he asked Myron. "Yes." "Weren't you a teenager once?" Dad shook his head, trying to hold in a smile. "I knew I shouldn't have left the night watch to you. Good night, all." Dad left. Myron and Mickey stood and looked at the floor. Emma sighed and said, "Grow up, both of you." The three of them grabbed cold drinks and took their seats around the kitchen table. "So," Myron asked, "what's your impression of Patrick? I mean, if it is Patrick." "He's a normal kid," Mickey said. "Too normal," Emma added. "What do you mean?" Emma put her hands on the table. Besides dressing in black and wearing black makeup, Emma had numerous tattoos up and down her arms. She had silver jewelry, including 2 skull rings on her hand. "He knew recent movies," she said. "He was up to date on the latest video games," Mickey said. "He knew about the newest apps, same with social media sites." Myron considered that. "I don't think he's been kept in a cage all this time, especially in recent, years. I mean, he was out on the streets. He lived under an arcade. The guy who was holding him in London is a major gamer. Couldn't that explain all that?" "It could," Mickey said. "But you don't buy it." Mickey shrugged. "What?" "I don't think he's who he says he is," Mickey said. Myron looked at Emma. Emma nodded. "His hands," she said. "What about them?" "They're soft." "It wasn't like he was doing hard labor," Myron said. "I know," Emma said, "but they don't look like the hands of someone who's been out on the streets either. And more than that, his teeth, they're straight, they're white. He may have incredible genes, but a safer bet would be that he's had proper dental care and braces." "It's hard to put a finger on it," Mickey added. "But Patrick doesn't look or sound, well, street. He doesn't look abused except, for the recent stuff. I mean, he might have been kept or taken care of by some whatever, but—" "Did you talk about the kidnapping at all?" Myron asked. "We tried," Emma said, "but we always got shot down." "Francesca was running interference," Mickey said. "Interference how?" "She was protecting him," Emma said, "which is understandable, I guess. So whenever we raised what happened, or even mentioned Reese's name, she would interrupt and get all emotional, crying and hugging him," Mickey said. "I mean, Patrick seemed kind of normal, but the sister was off." "I'm not sure I'd use the word off," Emma said. "Her brother comes home after 10 years. I think it would be weird if Francesca wasn't all emotional." "Yeah, maybe," Mickey said, but he didn't say it with much enthusiasm. "We tried to raise the kidnapping again after she left with Clark." "Wait," Myron said. "Clark Baldwin, Reese's brother?" "Yes." "He was there?" "He came in to pick up Francesca," Mickey said. "They go to Columbia together," Emma said. "He was giving her a ride back to campus." Myron said nothing. "Is that a big deal?" Emma asked. "I don't know." Myron thought about it some more. "It's odd, that's all. Maybe, I don't know. You think they're romantically involved?" Mickey rolled his eyes, as only a teenager could. "Oh, no." "What makes you so sure?" "Old dudes," Emma said to Mickey with a shake of the head. "No gaydar." "Clark is gay?" "Yes." "And what difference would it make if they were romantically involved? Weren't they like 10 when this all went down?" Something was niggling at the back of Myron's brain, but he couldn't figure out what yet. He moved back to the topic at hand. "So, after Francesca left, you tried to broach the subject of the kidnapping again?" "Yes, but—" Patrick got real quiet. "Completely clammed up. We left not long after that." Myron sat back for a moment. "How did he sound?" "Sound?" "We found him in London," Myron said. "We have no idea how long he's been there. Did you detect anything in his accent?" "That's a good question," Emma said. "His accent was American overall, but—" She turned to Mickey. He nodded. "It did have something else in it," Mickey said. "I can't put my finger on it exactly. He didn't sound like he'd grown up here, but he didn't sound like he'd grown up in England either." Myron tried to process that, but came up with nothing. He tried something else. "So, what did you do the whole time?" "We ate pizza," Emma said. We watched a movie, Mickey added. We played video games. We talked. Oh, Patrick said he had a girlfriend, Emma said, but not from around here. A girlfriend, Myron said. Yeah, but he backed right off. He said it, I don't know, like a kid bragging a little. You know, Mickey said, like when the new kid comes to town and says he has a girlfriend in Canada or something. Don't get us wrong, Emma said. He was nice enough. All kids talk about those kinds of things. It was just, I don't know. It felt so normal. Mickey nodded. Thanks, guys. This was really helpful. Oh, we're not done, Emma said. Myron looked at them. I put a keylogger on his computer, Mickey said. As in we can see whatever he types on it. Emails, social media, whatever. Whoa, Myron said. Who's monitoring him? Spoon. Spoon was Mickey's other close friend, if you counted Emma as only a friend, and what they used to call, or heck, maybe still do, a lovable nerd or geek or dork. Spoon was also ridiculously brave. How's he doing? Mickey smiled. He's walking again, and annoying everyone again, Emma added. Anyway, he'll let us know if anything important comes up. Myron wasn't sure what to say here. He didn't like these teenagers crossing this particular ethical line, but he wasn't in the mood to lecture them about privacy, or, more important, give up a chance of possibly finding out the truth. It was a close call. Patrick might not be Patrick. Patrick might hold the key to finding another missing boy. Then again, was spying on a teenager justified? Was it even legal? If you were the type of person who knew for sure what to do here, if you could make the call to spy or not spy without qualms or caveats, you'd be the kind of person Myron would find somewhat suspect. Life ain't that black and white. There's one more thing, Emma said. What? Emma glanced uneasily at Mickey. What? Myron said again. Mickey gestured for Emma to go ahead. Emma sighed and reached into her purse. She pulled out a small, clear plastic bag, the kind you used to get your toiletries past TSA. Here. Emma handed the bag to Myron. He held it up in the air. There was a toothbrush and strands of long hair. He put it down and waited a moment. Are these... Emma nodded. I got the toothbrush from Patrick's bathroom, she said. Then I sneaked down the hall and grabbed the hair from Francesca's hairbrush. Myron said nothing. He just stared at the contents in the plastic bag. Mickey stood. Emma followed suit. We figured maybe you could run a DNA test on them or something, Mickey said. Chapter 25. We are inside the farmhouse now. It is just the two of us, Fat Gandhi and moi. Zora now stands guard by the front door. Fat Gandhi's traveling companions, two of the men Myron had described as the gamers from his visit, and one male who could possibly be underage, are in the front yard with him. Your friend Zorro, Fat Gandhi begins. Zora. Pardon? His name is Zora, not Zorro. I mean no offense. I just stare at him. I've made us tea, Fat Gandhi says. I don't touch it. I think instead about the young male, the one who may be underage. In movies, one often hears the bad guys talk about how this is only business. I, for one, rarely believe it. Be you good or bad, you tend to gravitate toward what interests you. Most drug dealers, for example, partake of their wares. The people I've encountered who work in the porn industry have a predilection for the same. Those who run protection rackets enforced by violence rarely have an aversion to injuring others or the sight of blood. In fact, for the most part, they relish it. I look at my own role in this without irony, by the way. My point, Fat Gandhi may talk about how this is all business and profit to him, but I'm not sure that I believe it. I wonder whether there is a personal and unsavory explanation for his chosen line of work. And I wonder whether I should do something about it. I can't give you your cousin, Fat Gandhi says, because I don't have him. That's very unfortunate, I say. He does not meet my eye. This is good. He fears Zora. He fears me. As he said before, he does not want to spend the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. This is why I believe in massive and disproportional retaliation. It makes your next enemy think twice. Where is he? I ask. I don't know. I never had him. Yet you had Patrick Moore. I did, yes, but not like you think. He leans forward and grabs his cup of tea. I ask, how long was Patrick Moore in your employ? That's just it, he says, taking a sip from the cup. He never was. I cross my legs. Please explain. You killed my men, he says, 3 of them. Are you still looking for a confession? No, I'm telling the story. I'm starting at the beginning. I sit back and beckon him to continue. Fat Gandhi doesn't use the delicate handle of the teacup. He embraces it gently, using both hands, as though protecting an injured bird. You never asked my men why they approached Patrick Moore, did you? There was no time, I say. Perhaps you overreacted. Or perhaps they did. Fair enough, mate, fair enough. But we're getting off track. I'm going to tell you what happened. You then decide where we go from there, okay? I nod. So this kid, this Patrick Moore, he shows up on our turf. You understand about that sort of thing, don't you, Mr. Lockwood? Territorial disputes? Go on. So my man heard about it. You could be right. They may have been too heavy-handed. I don't know, I wasn't there, but that was their job. I've learned that on the streets. It's sometimes better to be heavy-handed, to overreact. I hear the echo of my own self-justification. It does not faze me in the least. So they braced Patrick Moore. I assume they decided to make an example of him. Then you appeared. You acted in such a way as to protect him. But tell me, Mr. Lockwood, what did Patrick Moore do? He ran away, I say. Exactly, my friend. He ran. Everyone ran, including Garth. Garth? The young man with the dog collar. Ah, I say. Garth naturally reported what happened. It got back to me. I called him. He told me about this new kid showing up on our turf, and then how some effete gentleman disposed of them. I arch an eyebrow. Effete? His word, not mine. I smile. I know that's untrue, but I let it go. Continue. Well, you can imagine, Mr. Lockwood, what I thought. 3 of my men slaughtered over what seemed a small territorial dispute. I don't know about America, but here that kind of thing doesn't just happen. I concluded that someone, you, sir, were declaring war on me. I concluded that the boy Patrick Moore, as it turned out, was part of a setup, that he was working with you to test my strength and resolve. Do you understand? I do. And to be candid, I didn't quite understand it. Those streets aren't all that profitable, so I put feelers out for the boy who ran away, Patrick. Garth said that he heard him utter a few words and that he sounded American. That confused me even more. Why would Americans be out to get me? But from there I put out the word. He puts down the tea. May I be immodest for a moment? Please. I more or less rule the streets of London, at least when it comes to this particular market. I know the hotels, I know the brothels, I know the shelters and rail stations and public transport where youngsters hide. I know the parks and alleys and dark corners. There is no one better at finding a missing teen than yours truly. My employees can scour the city better than any branch of law enforcement. He takes another sip of his tea, smacks his lips, sits the cup back down. So I put out a code red, Mr. Lockwood. It didn't take long for one of my contacts to find the boy. He was trying to check into a small hotel paying cash, so I sent a few of my more mature employees, you probably noticed them in camouflage pants, to apprehend him. They did so. They brought him back to the arcade. He takes another sip of tea. Patrick was alone when you found him? I ask. Yes. I mull this over. Did any of your people know him? No. Proceed, I say. Please understand, Mr. Lockwood, that at this time I believed that this American was working to disrupt and even destroy my business. I nod. So you treated him as a hostile. Fat Gandhi's smile is one of relief. Yes, you understand, then. I give him nothing. I shall we say, interrogated him. He tells you who he is, I say, putting it together, that he was kidnapped? Yes. What did you do? What I always do. I conduct research. I remember what Myron told me about Fat Gandhi's Hindu aphorism. Knowledge is bigger than debate, I say. He is unnerved by my knowledge of his quote. Yes. What did you find? I was able to confirm his story, which put me in something of a quandary. On the one hand, I could turn him over to the authorities. I could even end up a hero for rescuing him. I shake my head. But that would put too much heat on you. Precisely. Heroes put targets on their backs, even with the police. So you decided to look for a payoff. Honestly, I didn't know what to do. I am not a kidnapper. I also still needed to understand the threat. 3 of my men were dead after all. So I confess to you, Mr. Lockwood, that I wasn't quite sure what to do. I see it now. And then Myron shows up. Yes, he found Garth in the park. I have Garth bring him to the arcade. I figure that this is my chance. I can make money. I can get rid of Patrick. I can avenge my dead man. The other boy that Myron saw in the cell, I say. I assume he was just a plant. Yes, he was just one of the boys around that age. You figured you could collect more money for 2 than for 1. Fat Gandhi nods and spreads his hands. You know the rest. I do, but I need to clarify. You never saw Rhys Baldwin? No. And you have no idea where he is? None? But this is my proposal if you want to hear it. I sit back and cross my legs. I gesture for him to proceed. You forget me. I forget you. I go back to my life. Except for one thing. I have the sources on the street. I have the contacts. I use them now. In the same way I was able to find Patrick Moore, I use them to find Rhys Baldwin, if he can be found. I consider this. It sounds like a fair deal. I tell him this. Relief washes over him. We have a deal, for now. One more question, I say. He waits. You said, if he can be found. His face falls a little. I assume, I continue, that you asked Patrick Moore about Rhys Baldwin's whereabouts. He squirms just enough. It didn't really interest me, he replies. But you asked. I did, yes. What did he say? Fat Gandhi looks me square in the eye. He said that Rhys was dead. Chapter 26. The Morningside campus of Columbia University features a startlingly picturesque quad nestled between Broadway and Amsterdam Avenue on the west and east, and 114th Street and 120th Street south and north. You enter by College Walk on 116th Street, and suddenly, like something out of a wardrobe portal to Narnia, you are transported from the aging city, from the purely urban, from Manhattan at its most citified, to an idyllic campus of green and brick and domes and ivy. You feel protected in here, isolated, and maybe for the 4 years you spend here as an undergraduate. That's how it should be. Esperanza had found a campus directory that told her Francesca Moore lived in a 6-person suite in Ruggles Hall. It was 7 a.m. The quad was near silent. You needed a student ID to enter the building, so Myron waited by the door. To blend in, he donned a baseball cap and carried an empty pizza box. Myron Bolitar, master of disguise. When one kid finally emerged, Myron grabbed the door before it closed. The kid, probably used to delivery men coming at all hours, didn't say a word. Myron Bolitar, master of disguise, was inside. The corridors were eerily quiet. Myron headed to the 2nd floor and found the door to room 217. He'd come this early figuring that Francesca, like any college student, would still be asleep, and thus he was sure to find her here, and maybe even a little groggy. That might be a good thing. Catch her off guard and all that. Sure, he might disturb her roommates too, but he chalked that up to acceptable collateral damage. Myron didn't know what he hoped to find here, but stumbling around blind was a big part of his so-called investigations. You don't so much painstakingly search for the needle in the haystack as haphazardly leap into various haystacks, barefoot and naked, and then flail wildly and hope that, hey, ouch, there's a needle. Myron knocked on the door. Nothing. He knocked a little harder. More nothing. He put his hand on the knob and gave it a small turn. The door was unlocked. He debated just going in, but no, a strange adult entering the room of a college co-ed, not a smart move. When he knocked again, the door finally opened. Mr. Bolitar? It wasn't Francesca Moore. It was Clark Baldwin. Hey, Clark. Clark wore a T-shirt several sizes too large and checkered boxer shorts that even Myron's dad would consider retro. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "What are you doing here?" he asked Myron. "I could ask you the same question." I go to school here. I live here." "Oh," Myron said, "you and Francesca are roommates." "Sweet mates, yeah. I didn't know." "No reason you should," Clark said. "True that." "There are 6 of us," Clark continued, feeling the need to explain or perhaps get his bearings. 3 guys, 3 girls. It's the 21st century. Co-ed dorms, co-ed rooms, transgender bathrooms, we got it all. "Can I come in?" Myron asked. From behind him a male voice said, "What's going on, Clark?" "Go back to sleep, Matt," Clark said. "It's nothing." Clark slipped outside into the corridor and closed the door behind him. "Why are you here?" "I came to talk to Francesca," Myron said. Something crossed his face. "What about?" "About the econ final," Myron said. "I hear it's going to be a bitch." Clark made a face. "That's supposed to be funny?" "Well, I admit it's not one of my better lines, but Mom said you and Cousin Wynne are trying to find Reese." Myron nodded. "We are." "But Francesca doesn't know anything about that." Myron spared him the flailing in a haystack metaphor. "She may know more than she thinks she knows." Clark shook his head. "She would have told me," he said. Patience, Myron thought. If you're standing in front of a haystack, flail in that one before you move on, or something like that. In short, stay patient for now with Clark. "You two must be pretty tight," Myron said. "Francesca's my best friend." "You grew up together?" "Yes. But there's a lot more to it than that." A door opened down the corridor. A boy stumbled out as only a college student waking up early can. "She's the only one who got it," Clark continued. "You know what I mean?" Myron did, but he said, "Pretend I don't." "We were just kids. We were only in 5th grade. I remember Mr. Hickson's class. Dixon. Right. Sorry, Dixon. Go on." Clark swallowed and rubbed his chin. "So, we're just little kids. Francesca and I were friends, I guess, but we didn't hang out or anything. You know what that age is like, right?" Myron nodded. "Boys hung out with boys, girls with girls." "Right. But then everything, I mean, both our little brothers just," Clark snapped his fingers, "vanished. Like that. Do you not get what that did to us?" Myron wasn't sure if the question was rhetorical or not. The corridor had the stale stench of spilled beer and academic worry. There was a bulletin board overloaded with flyers, meetings for all kinds of groups and clubs, everything from badminton to belly dancing, from feminist thought to flute choir. There were clubs with names Myron didn't understand, like Orchesis or Gaia or Tal, and what was the Venom step team? "For a while, after your brother disappears, you stay home from school," Clark said, his voice far away. "I don't remember how long anymore. Was it a week, a month? I can't remember. But eventually you have to go back, and when you do, everyone looks at you like you're some kind of alien. Your friends, your teachers, everyone. Then you go home from school, and it's even worse. Your parents are falling apart. They're extra clingy because now they're scared of losing you too. So you come home and you try to escape to your room, but when you do, you walk right past his room. Every day. You move on, and yet you never move on. You try to forget, but that makes it worse. You try to get out from the shadow, but then you see your mother's sad face, and it knocks you back down again." Clark lowered his head. "And meanwhile," Myron thought, "you're just a kid." Myron wasn't sure it was the right move, but in the end he put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Thank you," Myron said. "For what?" "For sharing that. It must have been a nightmare." "It was," Clark said. "But that's my point. She made it better." "Francesca." Clark nodded. "I had someone who didn't just say they got it. I had someone who understood completely, because she was going through the same thing." "Right. And," Myron said, "vice versa. She had someone too." "Yeah, I guess. You get it, right? A friendship bonded in tragedy. Maybe the strongest kind of all." "Of course." "I came out to Francesca before anyone, even my parents, but of course she already knew. We could talk about anything. You were lucky to have her. You have no idea, Mr. Bolitar." Myron took his time with the next question. "And now that her brother is back?" Clark said nothing. "Now that her brother is back and yours isn't," Myron continued, "has your relationship changed?" His voice was soft. "Francesca is not here." "Where is she?" "Back home, I guess." "I thought you drove her in last night." "Who told you that?" he half-snapped. Then, "Oh, right, your nephew. He was at the house." Myron waited. "See, there was a party at the DKA house. I know it sounds stupid, what with finding her brother and all. She's been really confused lately, on edge. I mean, don't get me wrong, she's ecstatic. She couldn't even let Patrick out of her sight, at first anyway, but now maybe it's getting claustrophobic. Know what I mean?" "Sure," Myron said. "That's natural." "So she texted me to come get her." "And you drove her there?" "Yeah. We went to the party. It was a little out of control, but nothing we hadn't seen before. We drank. Maybe too much. I don't know. Anyway, at some point, she started freaking out." "Freaking out how?" "She started crying. I asked her what's wrong. She just shook her head. I tried to comfort her. I took her outside, to get a little fresh air. She just cried harder." "Did she say anything?" "She just kept sobbing. It wasn't right. It wasn't fair." "What wasn't fair?" Clark shrugged. "That she got her brother back and I didn't." Silence. Then, "What did you say?" "I told her I was happy for her. I told her that Patrick coming home was good news, that we can still find my brother too, but she just kept sobbing. And she said she needed to see her brother. She just wanted to make sure it was real or something, like maybe she dreamt Patrick was back. I get that, don't you?" "Sure. I used to have dreams like that all the time. Reese would be home, and it was like he was never gone or whatever, so I said I would drive her, but next thing I know, an Uber pulled up. She got in and said she would call me soon." "Has she?" "No. But it was only a few hours ago. I'm telling you, Mr. Bolitar, she doesn't know anything." There was no point in heading to the Moore house to question Francesca. Nancy or Hunter would just call a halt to it. Besides, Myron had other plans. His dad was waiting in the yard when Myron pulled up. The two men headed out for breakfast at Epis Essen, a Jewish-style, according to the brochure, deli and restaurant on the other side of town. Myron and Dad both ordered the same thing, Epis's famed Sloppy Joe sandwich. Many of you associate Sloppy Joes with that ground possible meat thingy in school cafeterias. This was not that. Epis Essen makes the authentic Sloppy Joes, momentous triple-decker sandwiches with rye bread, Russian dressing, coleslaw, and at least 3 meats, in this case, turkey, pastrami, corned beef. Dad stared down at his plate and then nodded his appreciation. "If God made a sandwich." "That should be Epis's slogan," Myron agreed. They finished, paid the check, and drove to the high school just as the boys' basketball team ran out for warm-ups. Mickey was in the middle of the pack. The home team was playing its arch-rival Milburn High. "Remember the game you had against them junior year?" Dad asked. Myron smiled. "Oh, yeah." With Myron's team up by only 1 point, Milburn had an easy fast-break layup to win it with 2 seconds remaining. The Milburn player cruised in ready to score the game winner when Myron, trailing the play, somehow leapt over the guy and pinned the ball onto the backboard as time ran out. The Milburn players screamed for goaltending. Hard to tell if it was or wasn't, but the ref didn't make the call. To this day, if Myron ran across one of the Milburn guys who'd played in that game, they would still good-naturedly complain about that no call. Ah, basketball. The gym had a healthy crowd for the rivalry. Some people pointed and whispered as Myron walked by. "Welcome to minor league local celebrity." A few came over and said hello. Old teachers, old neighbors, those guys in every town who hang out at games even when their kids aren't playing anymore. From near the foul line, Mickey spotted them and gave a quick wave. Dad, or in Mickey's case Grandpa, waved back. Dad started to make his way up the stands. He always took the back row. He didn't want to be the center of attention. Dad never yelled, never called out, never coached, never rode referees, never moaned, never complained. He might clap. When he got really excited during a big game, when Myron would hit a big shot, he might say, "Nice pass, Bob," or something like that, deflecting the praise. Dad never cheered for his own son. It simply wasn't done. "If I have to cheer for you to know I'm proud," Dad once told Myron, "then I'm doing something wrong." Never one to miss a moment of nostalgia. Myron flashed back to those long-ago days when he would warm up on a court like this and look across the gym and watch his dad take the steps of the bleachers 2 at a time. Not today, of course. Today, Dad's movements were more hesitant and shuffle-like. He took frequent breaks. He grimaced and got out of breath. Myron put his hand out to help him, but his dad shook it off. "I feel great," he said. "It's just the knee." But he didn't look great. "Okay, Dad." They sat in the top row, just the two of them. "I like it up here," Dad said. Myron nodded. "Myron?" "Yeah." "I'm fine." "I know. Your mother and I are getting older. That's all." "And that's the problem," Myron wanted to say. He got it. To everything there is a season, turn, turn, turn. The earth revolves, life cycles. But that didn't mean he had to like it. The horn buzzed. The players stopped warming up and headed to their benches. The guy in the microphone began, as every New Jersey high school basketball game must, by reading the state's sportsmanship policy. "There will be no tolerance for negative statements or actions between opposing players and coaches. This includes taunting, baiting, berating opponents, trash-talking, or actions which ridicule or cause embarrassment to them. Any verbal, written, or physical conduct related to race, gender, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, or religion shall not be tolerated, could subject the violator to ejection, and may result in penalties being assessed against your team. If such comments are heard, a penalty will be assessed immediately. We have been instructed not to issue warnings. It is your responsibility to remind your team of this policy." "A necessary evil," Dad said. Then, motioning to the spot where the father sat, he added, "Doesn't stop those jackasses." Mickey's short tenure at the high school had not been without controversy. He was back on the team, however unlikely that it seemed a few weeks back, but there were some residual bad feelings. Myron saw among those vocal dads his old nemesis and former high school teammate Eddie Taylor, now the chief of police in town. Taylor hadn't seen Myron yet, but he glared hard at Mickey. Myron didn't like that. Myron stared at the chief until finally Taylor felt his eyes, turned, and looked Myron's way. The two men glared at each other another second or two. "If you got a problem, you glare at me," Myron tried to say with his eyes, "not my nephew." Dad said, "Ignore him. Eddie has always been what the kids today call an asswaffle." Myron laughed out loud. "Asswaffle?" "Yep. Who taught you that?" "Emma," Dad said. "I like her, don't you?" "Very much," Myron agreed. "Is it true?" Dad asked. "What?" "That Emma's mother is Angelica Wyatt?" It was supposed to be a secret. Angelica Wyatt was one of the most popular actresses in the world. To protect her only child and her own privacy, they had moved to a large estate on a hill here in New Jersey. "It's true. And you know her?" Myron nodded. "A bit." "Who's her father?" "I don't know." Dad started craning his neck. "I'm surprised Emma's not here." They settled back as the game began. Myron loved every second of it, sitting with his dad in the gym, watching his nephew dominate the game Myron so loved. It was simple and primitive and blissful. There were no pangs anymore. He missed it, sure, But it was way past his time, and man, oh man, did he love watching his young nephew reveling in the experience. It made Myron a little teary. At one point, after Mickey made a turnaround jumper, Dad shook his head and said, "He's really good." "He is. He plays like you. He's better." Dad considered that. "Different eras. He may not go as far as you." Myron said. "What makes you say that?" "How to put this?" Dad began. "For you, basketball was everything. Mickey's pretty dedicated, too, no question. But it's not everything. There's a difference. Let me ask you a question." "Okay. When you look back at how competitive you were, what do you think?" Mickey made a steal. A cheer rose from the crowd. Myron couldn't help but smile. "I guess I was a little crazy." "It was important to you. Ridiculously important," Myron agreed. Dad arched an eyebrow. "Too important?" "Probably, yeah. But that's one of the things that separated you from the other talented players. That desire is almost too tame a word. That need to win, that single-minded focus, that's what made you the best." Wynne had often said something similar of Myron's playing days at Duke. "When you're competing, you're barely sane." "But now," Dad continued, "you have perspective. You've experienced tragedies and joys that have taught you that there are more important things in life than basketball. And Mickey, don't take this the wrong way, Mickey had to grow up young. He's already suffered more than his share of tragedy." Myron nodded. "He already has perspective." "Exactly." The horn blew, ending the first quarter. Mickey's team was up by 6. "Who knows," Myron said. "Maybe his wisdom will make him a better player. Maybe perspective is as good as single-minded focus." Dad liked that. "Maybe you're right." They watched Mickey's teammates break the huddle and take the ball out of bounds to start the second quarter. "I loathe sports metaphors," Dad said. "But there is one important thing both of you learned on the court and do in real life." "What's that?" Dad nodded to the court. Mickey drove through the lane, drew a defender, dished a pass to a teammate who scored an easy bucket. "You make those around you better." Myron said nothing. His nephew had that look on his face, the one Myron knew so well. There was a zen to being on the court, a calm in the storm, a purity, a concentration, the ability to slow down time. Then Myron saw Mickey's eyes flick to the left. He pulled up for a second. Myron followed Mickey's gaze to see what had drawn that reaction. Emma had walked into the gym. She narrowed her eyes and scanned the stands. Myron gave a small wave. She nodded that she saw him and started toward him. Myron rose and met her halfway. "What's up?" he asked. "It's about Patrick," Emma said. "You better come with me." Emma didn't take him far, just to the head custodian's office in the high school's main building. She opened the door and held it for him. Myron stepped inside and recognized the kid at the desk. "Hello, Mr. Bolitar." They called the kid Spoon. Mickey had given him the nickname, though Myron wasn't sure of the origins. Spoon's father was the head custodian at the high school, which explained why Spoon had access to this space. The office was small and tidy and loaded with perfectly pruned plants. "I told you to call me Myron." The kid swiveled his chair so that he was facing Myron. Spoon wasn't wearing a pocket protector, but he had the look of a kid who should have been. Using one finger, Spoon pushed his Harry Potter glasses up his nose. Spoon gave Myron a crooked grin. "You know those stickers that supermarkets put on fruit?" Emma sighed. "Not now, Spoon." "Sure, I know them," Myron said. "You peel them off your fruit before you eat it?" "I do." "Did you know," Spoon continued, "that those stickers are edible?" "I did not." "You don't have to peel them off if you don't want to. Even the glue is food grade." "Good info. Is that why I'm here?" "Of course not," Spoon said. "You're here because I think Patrick Moore is about to leave his house." Myron stepped toward the desk. "What makes you say that?" "He just finished Skyping with someone on his laptop." Spoon leaned back in his chair. "Are you aware, Myron, that Skype's headquarters are located in Luxembourg?" Emma rolled her eyes. "Who did Patrick Skype with?" Myron asked. "That I can't say." "What did they talk about?" "That I can't say either. The keylogger planted by my lovely associate," he gestured toward Emma, who looked like she wanted to kick him, does just that. It records, or logs, if you prefer, the keys struck on a keyboard. So I can see Patrick Moore signed into Skype. I can't, of course, see what they said. So what makes you think he's leaving the house? Myron asked. A simple deduction, my friend. Immediately after turning off Skype, Patrick Moore, or whoever is using his computer, visited the New Jersey Transit website. From what I can gather, he was searching for bus routes into New York City. Myron checked his watch. How long ago was this? Spoon checked the elaborate watch on his wrist. 14 minutes and 11, 12, 13 seconds ago. Chapter 27. For reasons Myron could never fathom, Big Cindy was great at tailing people. Perhaps it was that she was so obvious, so in your face, so out there that you never really saw her or suspected a woman who wore a clingy purple Batgirl costume to be following you. Her costume, a somewhat larger replica of the one Yvonne Craig wore on the old Batman TV show, was snug to the point where it might be mistaken for sausage casing. Today, however, the outfit did blend in a very particular way. Myron spotted Big Cindy the moment he entered Times Square. Think of every cliché you can about Times Square, mush them together, stack cliché upon cliché, the ones about the kinetic waves of humanity and the traffic and the ginormous billboards and moving screens and neon lights. Then take what you're imagining and raise it to the 10th power. Welcome to Times Square. Times Square is an assault on every sense, and somehow that includes not only scent, but taste. Everything is in motion and swirling, and you want to give the entire square a giant Adderall. There, along with Spider-Man, Elmo, Mickey Mouse, Buzz Lightyear, and Olaf from Frozen, stood Big Cindy in full costume. Tourists were lined up to pose for photographs with her, Batgirl. "They love me, Mr. Bolitar," Big Cindy called out. Who doesn't? Big Cindy tee-heed and struck poses that would have made Madonna in her Vogue days blush. An Asian tourist offered her some cash after taking the picture, but Big Cindy refused. "Oh, I couldn't, kind sir." "Are you sure?" the tourist asked. "This is charity." She bent down closer to him. "If I wanted to be paid for wearing this outfit, I would still be hooking." The tourist hurried away. Big Cindy looked at Myron. "I was joking, Mr. Bolitar. I know that. I never hooked. Good to know. Though I made buku bucks when I wore this working the pole." "Uh-huh," Myron said, not wanting to go down this particular lane of memory. "At Leather and Lace, remember?" "I do, yes. And, okay, sometimes things went too far when I'd get hired for a lap dance. If you get my drift." "Drift gotten," Myron said quickly. "So, where's Patrick? Can you give me an update?" "Young Patrick sneaked out of his house 2 hours ago," Big Cindy said. "He walked approximately 1 mile into town and took bus 487. I looked it up. Bus 487's final destination is Port Authority in New York City. I drove my car and arrived before the bus. I waited for him to get off and followed him here." "Here where?" Myron asked. "Don't turn suddenly, because you'll be obvious." "Okay." "Patrick is standing behind you between the Madame Tussauds Wax Museum and Ripley's Believe It or Not." Myron waited. Then he said, "Can I look now?" "Turn slowly." Myron did. Patrick stood on 42nd Street wearing a baseball cap pulled low. His shoulders were hunched as though he was trying to disappear. "Has he talked to anyone?" Myron asked. "No," Big Cindy replied. "Mr. Bolitar?" "Yes." "Do you mind if I pose for more photographs while we wait? My public demands it." "Go for it." Myron kept his eye on Patrick, but he also couldn't help but watch Big Cindy work the crowd. 30 seconds after she got back into action, the queue to have a photo taken with her was so long, the naked cowboy looked at her askance. She glanced at Myron. Myron gave her a big thumbs up. Here was the simple, awful truth. It was often hard to see beyond Big Cindy's size. We as a society have many prejudices, but there are very few of our fellow citizens we stigmatize and judge less charitably than what we consider to be large women. Big Cindy was all too aware of that. She'd once explained her outgoing lifestyle, if you will, thusly. "I'd rather see shock on their faces than pity, Mr. Bolitar, and I'd rather they see brazen or outrageous than shrinking or scared." Myron turned back toward Ripley's just as a teenage girl sidled up to Patrick. Who the... Myron remembered what Mickey and Emma had told him about Patrick's claim of having a girlfriend. But if he'd been living in quasi-captivity in London, how would he know anyone in New York City? Good question. Patrick and the girl exchanged a quick, awkward hug before heading inside Ripley's. Big Cindy was by Myron's side now. When Myron started toward the ticket window, Big Cindy stopped him. "He knows you," she reminded him. "You'll go in?" Big Cindy pointed to the sign with an index finger the size of a baguette. "It's called an auditorium. Who better?" Hard to argue. "You wait by the exit," she said. "I'll text you updates." Myron stayed on the street for an hour and people-watched. He liked people-watching. Great views of sunsets and water and greens are wonderful, he supposed, but after a while they become something you barely notice. But if you're in a spot where you can watch people walk by, every race, gender, size, shape, religion, language, whatever, you are never bored. Everyone is their own universe, a life, a dream, a hope, a sorrow, a joy, a surprise, a revelation, a story, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, even when they simply walk by you on the street. The phone vibrated when Big Cindy's text came in. "Exiting now." Big Cindy always texted in capital letters. Patrick kept his head low as he came out. The teenage girl stood right next to him. Big Cindy loomed behind them. The teenage girl gave Patrick a quick peck on the cheek. Then Patrick started heading west, away from Times Square. The girl moved east. They were splitting up. Big Cindy looked at Myron for instructions. Myron gestured to Patrick. Big Cindy nodded and started to follow him. Myron fell into a current of humans and tailed the girl. She turned left on 7th Avenue and started uptown. Myron followed. She headed all the way up to 59th Street and turned right on Central Park South. They passed the Plaza Hotel and turned north on 5th Avenue. The teenager walked steadily and confidently, and with no hesitation. Myron assumed from this observation that she had made this journey before and probably lived in New York City. "Myron Bolitar, master of deduction. Please, don't shun him for his gifts." She turned east on East 61st Street. When she crossed Park Avenue, Myron saw her reach into her bag and ready her key. The townhouse in front of her had a wrought iron gate. She unlocked it. Then she moved down 2 steps and vanished inside. A townhouse near Park Avenue, Myron thought. The girl probably came for money. Again, Myron Bolitar, master of deduction. If you prick him, does he not bleed? He stood outside and debated his next move. First, he texted Big Cindy. "Update." Big Cindy. "Patrick is on the bus. Assume he's heading back home." Myron. "I'll be the master of deduction, thank you very much." Big Cindy. "What?" Myron. "Never mind." He stared at the door and hoped it would open so he could... So he could what? Was he going to approach a teenage girl on the street and ask about her relationship with the boy she just met up with at Ripley's Auditorium? Myron wasn't a cop. He wasn't licensed in any way, shape, or form. He would just be a creepy, middle-aged stranger approaching a young girl. He didn't know her name. He didn't know anything about her. No, that would be the wrong move here. He picked up his phone and called Esperanza. "What's up?" "I have an address near Park Avenue." "Well, la-di-da, I live in a 1-bedroom in Hoboken." "That was funny," Myron said. "Wasn't it, though?" "Give me the address." Myron did. "I followed a teenage girl here." "Aren't you engaged?" "Ha-ha. She met up with Patrick. I need to find out who she is." "On it." When he hung up again, his phone rang. He saw from the caller ID it was Therese. He answered the phone, saying, "Hey, beautiful." "God, you're smooth." "You think so?" "No," Therese said. "In fact, I think it's your lack of smoothness that makes you so damn sexy. Guess what? Myron started walking back. He had parked his car in a crowded theater lot by Times Square. "What?" "The network sent me home on their private jet." "Whoa, big time." "I just landed at Teterboro." "Did you get the job?" he asked. "I'll hear soon." Myron stopped on the corner. Should he walk back to his car or catch a taxi? "Are you on your way to the apartment, then?" "I am." "Want to do the nasty?" he asked. "Wow, I take it back. You are smooth." "Is that a yes?" "It's most definitely a yes." "You can't see," Myron said, "but I'm sprinting to the car right now." "Faster," she said, before hanging up. Myron parked his car in the underground lot behind the Dakota. When he started up the dark ramp, 3 men appeared. The one in the middle he recognized. It was Reese's dad, Chick Baldwin. The other 2 wore jeans and flannel shirts. They were big and trying to look bigger. One carried a baseball bat. "I told you to let it go," Chick said. Myron sighed. "Are you for real?" "I warned you to forget those texts, didn't I?" "You did." "Well?" "And I didn't listen," Myron said. "Can we move this along? I kind of have plans. Big plans." Chick used his hand to slick back his hair. "Did you think I was, what, playing with you?" "I don't know, Chick, and I really don't care. So what's your next step?" Myron pointed out the 2 men in flannel shirts. "Are these 2 monkeys supposed to rough me up?" "Who you calling monkey?" asked Monkey with the bat. "Yeah," Batless Monkey chimed in. "You're the monkey, not us." Myron tried not to sigh. "Do you gentlemen see that up there?" He pointed above their heads. When the 2 monkeys looked up, Myron kicked the one holding the bat in the balls, snatching away the bat before said monkey folded like a beach chair. Myron looked at Batless Monkey. Batless Monkey thought that this might be a good time to retreat, and did so with gusto. Myron looked at Chick. "You didn't have to do that," Chick said. "Why did you bring them?" "To make you pay attention, I guess." "I'm paying attention now." Chick moved to the former bat-carrying monkey and bent down to help him. "You're more like Brooke's psycho cousin than I realized." "Chick." "What?" "I'm on my way somewhere very special," Myron said. "I will definitely and without hesitation whack you with this bat if you don't move out of my way." "Just go," Chick said. Myron studied his face for a moment and realized something. "You're mad because I talked to Nancy Moore about your texts." "I told you not to, right? I practically begged you." "That's not the point, Chick." "What is?" "Only one way you could know I did that. Nancy Moore told you." Myron Bolitar, master of deduction, strikes again. Chick said nothing. Myron moved toward him and helped the former bat-wielder to his feet. Myron told the man to skedaddle. He did as requested, albeit with a bit of a limp. Myron turned his attention back to Chick. "And that means," Myron was on a roll now, "you 2 are in contact about the texts. And that means there was something really significant between the 2 of you." Chick's voice could not have been more crestfallen without an actual crest or fall in view. "You have to leave it alone, Myron. I'm begging you. Even if it's the key to finding your son, it's not. If I thought it had anything to do with Reese, I would be shouting it every day from the rooftops, but it doesn't. Why can't you believe me?" "Because you're too close to it. You're not objective." Chick closed his eyes. "You won't let this go, will you?" "I won't, no. And let me give you a little push here, Chick. If you don't tell me, I'm going to ask Brooke about them." Chick winced, as though the words had formed a fist and threatened to punch him. "You have to understand one thing first." "I don't have to understand, but go ahead." "I love Brooke. I always have. I always will. Our life isn't perfect. I know that psycho Win..." "Chick." "What?" "Stop calling my friend names, okay?" Chick nodded. "Yeah, whatever. Win hates me. He thinks no one is good enough." Myron checked his watch. Therese would be in the apartment by now. "You told me this already." "Not really," he said. Again, Chick gave him the crestfallen look. "You need to know how much I love my wife and family. I ain't a perfect man." I've done some really questionable things in my time. The thing that gives me humanity, the only thing that really matters, is my love for my family, for Brooke, for Clark." His chest started to hitch, and the tears started to flow. "And for Reese." Chick broke into a sob. The real thing, no faking, no trying to hide it. Oh, man, Myron thought. Stay strong, stay focused, but remember, this guy is searching for his lost son. When Chick was back in control, Myron pushed him again. "Why were you two texting, Chick?" "We didn't have an affair." "What then?" "We were going to. That was the thing. We didn't do it. But we were going to." "I thought you loved your wife." "You're not married, are you, Myron?" "Engaged." Chick wiped the tears. He managed to smile, but there was no joy there. "We don't have time to get into it. But you're old enough to know that life isn't black and white. It's lived in the gray. We get older, we think we're going to die, we reach for something, even if it's stupid. So that's what we did, me and Nancy. We started flirting. It went too far. We started to make plans because that's how these things are. Like everything else in this horrible world, it gets worse, not better. You reach a stage where you either go through with it or it dies." "So what happened, Chick?" "It died." "You didn't go through with it?" "We stopped in time." Myron thought about that. Who stopped it? Mutual. "It's never mutual, Chick. We both eased into it," he said. "And then we both eased out of it." "When?" "What?" "When did you both ease out of it?" "I don't know." "How long before your son disappeared?" "I told you. It had nothing to do with that." "How long?" "I told you. I don't know." "And why were you so afraid to tell anyone?" "I didn't want Brooke to find out." "Really? Even back then? Your kid is missing, and you're worried about that. I mean, you lied to the police over flirtation." "There wasn't just me and my family to consider." "There was Nancy Moore's, too." "See it from our perspective, okay? Suppose we told the police, okay? Suppose we told the police all about it. What would have happened?" Myron did not bother replying. "You get why we didn't say anything. Who'd believe us? They find these texts, and we say, 'Oh, yeah, we almost hooked up.' You think the cops are going to look at this right? We were already getting hard questions. We admit to almost having an affair, and that's all they'd look at. And now, if Brooke finds out..." Chick started tearing up again. "It would kill us, okay? Please. It's all I got left." Myron tried to ignore the pain on his face. "So Brooke never found out?" "No." "And Hunter?" "Same. Don't you see? If we copped to this thing back then, when everyone was so weak, when all the relationships were already so strained, it would have destroyed us all. We'd have never made it." "But Hunter and Nancy didn't make it anyway, did they?" He shook his head. "That had nothing to do with this." "How do you know, Chick? How do you know for sure?" Chapter 28. Myron opened the apartment door, trying to nudge himself back in the mood, though he wasn't really worried. At the end of the day, sexist or not, he was a guy. Guys are remarkably consistent about this part of their lives. Ladies, here's a little seduction tip. It doesn't take a lot to get your man in the mood. You know this already. You see all those articles in women's magazines about how to seduce your man, how to use massage oils or candles or music to get him in the mood. Men, for better or worse, aren't that complicated. Here are 2 short articles on how to seduce your man. Ask him if he wants to have sex, and say, "Yes, that would be nice." He smiled at the thought, already returning to form, when he entered the apartment and saw that they had company. Esperanza was there. "Sorry for the cock-block," she said. Myron ignored her for the moment and swept Therese into his arms. They just held each other in a tight embrace. That was all. A simple, deep hug. Myron closed his eyes. Therese pulled him even closer. Esperanza said, "We, have 10 minutes, if you want me to wait outside." They let each other go and still held hands. Myron arched an eyebrow. "A full 10 minutes?" Ooh, Therese said. Time for extended foreplay. You two are cute, Esperanza said in a voice that indicated that they were anything but. You know how it's never annoying to be around people madly in love? That. Want to tell us why you're here? Myron asked her. I got the information on that residence faster than you might have liked. The townhouse is owned by a Jesse and Mindy Rogers. Big bucks. Dad is a hedge fund guy. Mom is a career diplomat. They have a 16-year-old daughter named Tamron. So why do we only have 10 minutes? She's doing a summer internship at Fox News on Avenue of the Americas and 48th Street. The News Corp building, like pretty much every high-rise in Manhattan, has security and requires ID to enter. Her 10-hour shift starts at 2 p.m., so if we get over there now, we can maybe talk to her before she gets inside. Right. Myron looked at Therese. Will you wait for me? Better than starting without you. Not sure about that, Esperanza added. Both women laughed. Myron did not. Let's go, he said. Myron and Esperanza were standing on the Avenue of the Americas in front of the high-rise when Myron finally asked, What's wrong? Tom wants to negotiate custody of Hector now. Hey, that's great news. Esperanza just stared at him. Don't do that. What? You gonna lie to me now? I didn't touch him, I swear. What did you do? I just paid Tom a little visit. You mean like Wynne does? No, I didn't go near his apartment. Where then? It was outside a nightclub, Myron said. Then, do you know your ex-husband is sporting a man bun now? He's over 40, isn't he? Don't deflect attention from the matter at hand. What did you do? I nicely suggested he make peace with you. That wouldn't sway Tom. I may have mentioned that Wynne was back. Esperanza tried not to smile at the thought of Tom's face when he heard that. You shouldn't have done that without telling me. Sorry. It's so patronizing. You know that, right? It wasn't meant to be. It may also be vaguely sexist, Esperanza said. If Tom were a woman, would you have made the same threat? Myron opened his mouth, closed it, spread his hands. Did I mention he was sporting a man bun? She sighed. Okay, I can't argue with that. They stood and waited. Remember when you asked me why I didn't say anything before you married Tom? It was a few days ago. I can sometimes remember back a whole week. I told you I didn't think it was my business to interfere. Do you remember what you replied? Esperanza nodded and quoted herself. Whose business was it then? Right, Myron said. I won't make that mistake again. That was when he spotted the teenage girl who had gone to Ripley's with Patrick Moore. Myron gestured to Esperanza. She nodded back. They'd already agreed to approach her together, figuring that as a couple they might come across as less threatening and yet more authoritative. Esperanza took the lead. Tamron Rogers? She stopped, looked at Myron, then back at Esperanza. Yes? My name is Esperanza Diaz. I'm Myron Bolitar. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions? She took half a step back. Are you cops? No, nothing like that, Esperanza said. I'm 16, Tamron Rogers replied. Talking to strangers isn't really my thing, so, bye now. Esperanza glanced at Myron. They both got it. Nice wasn't going to work here. Myron went straight at it. I saw you today, he said. Excuse me? At Ripley's, a few hours ago. I saw you. Tamron Rogers' mouth formed a small O. You're following me? No. I was following Patrick. Who? Esperanza took that one. The boy you met up with today. That's not... She stopped herself and took another step away from them. I didn't meet up with anybody. I saw you, Myron said. Saw what exactly? You met up with Patrick Moore. I went to a museum, she said. Some boy started talking to me, that's all. Myron frowned at Esperanza. Esperanza frowned at Tamron. So you didn't know the boy before today? No. Never saw him before? Never. You always hug boys you've never met? Myron asked. Give them a little kiss on the cheek before you leave? Look, no one is trying to get anyone in trouble here, Esperanza said. We're just looking for the truth. By spying on me? She turned to Myron. "I'm 16 years old. What kind of man spies on a 16-year-old? "A man who's trying to find another 16-year-old, Myron said. "A man who is trying to find a boy who has been missing for 10 years. "I don't know what you're talking about. "Yeah, you do," Myron said. "How do you know Patrick?" "I told you I don't know him. He just started talking to me." "That's not true," Myron said. "You," Tamron pointed at Myron, "stay away from me." Then she turned to Esperanza. "You too. Leave me the hell alone or I'm going to scream for help." She started toward the door. "We could talk to your parents," Myron said. "Go ahead," she shouted, drawing a few glances. "Just leave me alone." She hurried toward the glass door and entered. Myron and Esperanza watched her take out her ID, swipe it, and head toward the elevators. When she was out of sight, Myron said, "I think that went well, don't you?" "So," Myron said to Esperanza, "how does a wealthy girl from Manhattan know a boy who's been missing 10 years?" "Most obvious answer is that he hasn't been missing for 10 years, Esperanza said. "Then where has he been? Or, more to the point, who is he, if he's really Patrick Moore? Did you catch how she balked when I first said his name? Like she didn't know him by it," Esperanza said. "In a way, it's the only thing that makes sense. If he's Patrick Moore who was kidnapped 10 years ago, I don't know that Tamron Rogers would know him. But if he's an imposter—" "Then maybe," Myron said. "Of course, we would still need to figure out how a rich New York teen would know our imposter." "Oh, that one's easier," Esperanza said. "Do tell." "We women love a bad boy. You think, what, rich Tamron only knows wealthy socialites?" Myron thought about that. "You think she's slumming?" "I don't know, but it's certainly possible. First, we need to figure out if the boy you rescued is Patrick Moore or not. What's the story with the DNA test?" "We got it over to Joe Corliss at the lab," Myron said. "He said it might take a few days. Some problem with the collection. He's having trouble finding a hair with a decent root on it. The DNA off the toothbrush might be contaminated. I don't know all the details. In the meantime, we need to get all we can on Tamron Rogers." "I'll do all the traditional sleuthing," Esperanza said. "But as she repeatedly just told us, she's a 16-year-old girl." "Meaning?" "How about we get that Spoon kid on it, too? He can figure out the social media angles." "Good idea." "Mickey wants to meet with me anyway," Esperanza said. "I'll get him the info for Spoon." Myron made a face. "Wait, why does Mickey want to meet with you?" Esperanza shrugged. "You didn't say? I didn't ask. Now, get back to your apartment and defile your honey." "I don't defile." "Then you're not doing it right," Esperanza said with a wink. She gave Myron a kiss on the cheek. "Stay safe, okay? You too." They split up. Myron hopped in a taxi. He texted Therese. "On my way. You ready?" Myron's heart sank when he saw the answer. No." When Myron got back to the apartment, Wynne was there. "Sorry for the cock block," he said. Chapter 29. "So," Wynne began, swirling his snifter of cognac, "let's review, shall we?" "Okay. I'll go first," Wynne said. "Patrick Moore told Fat Gandhi that Reese is dead." Wynne's living room at the Dakota resembled something you might see on a tour of Versailles. The two old friends sat in their usual spots they hadn't sat in together for more than a year. Wynne took a sip of the cognac and took in the surroundings. Feeling nostalgic, Myron chugged Yoo-hoo from an ice-cold can. "Do you believe him?" Myron asked. "Who? Fat Gandhi or Patrick?" Myron nodded. "Either. Both. Neither." "Precisely." Therese had excused herself as soon as Myron returned. She had suggested, now that Wynne was back, that she and Myron pack and depart to give Wynne his privacy. Wynne had replied that he'd had a year of privacy, thank you very much, and that he'd be insulted if they left. "Self-interest," Wynne said. "At the end of the day, it comes down to that always." "Meaning?" "Meaning, I see no motive for Fat Gandhi to lie here. I'm not saying he wouldn't lie, is not a compulsive liar, is not a horrible human being who may not only be selling underage sex, but participating in said rape and abuse, but I don't see how this lie works in his self-interest." Maybe he killed Reese and is covering that. Wynne lifted his free hand and tilted it one way, then the other. It is certainly a possibility, but I see no motive. It is also a possibility that he stored Reese somewhere and hopes to use him as a pawn at a later time, but I don't think so. Fat Gandhi was frightened. You can do that to a person. Wynne tried not to smile. I can, can't I? Oh, and I had an old friend of ours with me. Who? Zora. Myron's eyes widened. For real? No, Wynne said in a tone so dry it could have caught fire. I'm making it up. You and Zora? Myron took another chug. Heck, I'm scared just thinking about it. I offered Fat Gandhi an opportunity to rid himself of his issues with us by handing over Reese. I believe that he would have snapped up that chance if he could. They sat in silence for a few moments. We always knew this was a possibility, Myron said. That Reese was dead, yes. Wynne nodded. Of course. But we still have a long way to go. We don't even know for sure that Patrick is Patrick. We look at the beginning, Wynne said. And we look at the end. Yeah, you've said that. You should probably put that in a fortune cookie. Zora, Wynne said. What about him? I sent him to Finland. Myron thought about that. To find the nanny. Au pair, Wynne corrected. I'm going to skip the eye roll. Her name, if you recall, is Vada Lina. I recall. She doesn't exist anymore. Pardon? She would be 28. There is no Vada Lina in Finland, or anywhere else for that matter, anywhere near that age range. Myron thought about that. She changed her name. God, you're good! With all the press attention during the kidnapping, it's not much of a surprise. Perhaps, Wynne said, except her father doesn't exist anymore either. He could have passed away. No record of it. They both, it seems, vanished. Myron considered that. So what's your theory? I don't have a good one yet. That's why I put Zora on it. Sure that's wise? Why wouldn't it be? Might be a case of using a blowtorch when all you need is a match. Wynne smiled. I always use the blowtorch. Hard to argue. Wynne sat back and crossed his legs. Now, let's go through the rest of this point by point, shall we? Myron filled him in on everything. The visits to the Moore house, Mickey and Emma's opinion, Emma stealing the toothbrush and the hairs for DNA. Wynne smiled broadly at that one. The texts, Chick's reaction, Tamron Rogers, all of it. They discussed, analyzed, drove down various dark roads that all led to dead ends. They ended as they began. Do we tell Brooke what Fat Gandhi said? Wynne pondered that. It's your call. That surprised Myron. Mine? Yes. I don't get it. Why? Simple. Wynne put down the snifter and steepled his hands. You're better at this than I am. No, I'm not. Don't feign modesty. You are more objective, your judgment is sounder. You and I have been doing this a long time. Helping those in trouble, finding missing people, rescuing those in need, have we not? We have. And in every situation, you have been the leader. I'm the support staff. I'm your muscle, if you will. We are partners, a team, but, to keep within this quick metaphor, you are the captain of the team. I've made mistakes. So have I. Wynne shook his head. I didn't have to kill all 3 of those men that first day. I could have kept one alive. I could have offered them money to back off. The fact is, I'm objective enough to know I cannot be objective. Did you see Brooke's face? Myron nodded. You know, Wynne said, that I care about very few people. Myron did not reply. You know that when I care with a ferocity that doesn't always make me rational. We have had success in the past with you taking the lead. We've also messed up, Myron said. We've lost a lot of people. We have, Wynne agreed, but we win more than we lose. Wynne waited for Myron to continue. Brooke would want to know, Myron said. We should tell her. Okay, then. But first, Myron said, let's confront Patrick with what we know. You don't get anywhere on the phone, so Myron and Wynne took the drive out to the Moore home in New Jersey. There was no answer at the door. Myron took a peek in the window of the garage. No car. Wynne spotted the for sale sign in the yard. "You saw this?" Wynne asked. Myron nodded. "They were all moving to Pennsylvania to be closer to Hunter." "Do you have Hunter's address?" "I do." Myron took out his mobile phone and brought up a map. "According to this, we can make it in an hour and 15 minutes. Perhaps," Wynne said, "I should drive." Less than an hour later, they reached a dirt road deep in the woods. There was a chain blocking access. A rusted sign read, "Lake Charmaine, private." Myron got out of the car. There was a padlock on one end of the chain. Using his heel, Myron kicked down on it. The lock broke. The chain fell to the ground with a heavy clunk. "We're trespassing," Myron said. "Let's live on the edge, old friend. That's where all the goodies reside." As they drove up the dirt road, Lake Charmaine, in all its splendor, rose before them. The sun glistened off the water. Myron checked the GPS and instructed them to circle to the other side of the lake. They veered to the left and drove past the kind of log cabin you thought existed only in old movies. A car with an MD license plate was parked in front of it. On the dock, a man about Myron's age cast out his fishing line slowly, gracefully, like poetry in motion. He then handed the rod to a small boy and put his arm around a woman's waist. They stood there, this idyllic family of three, and Myron thought about Therese. The man on the dock turned at the sound of the car. The woman kept her eyes on the little boy with the fishing rod. The man's eyes narrowed as Myron and Wynne cruised past. Myron waved to show him that they meant him no harm. The man hesitated and then waved back. They drove past ruins of what might have once been camp cabins or cabins used on a retreat or something. A construction crew was now building a house on the site. "Nancy Moore's new residence?" Wynne asked. "Maybe." A pickup truck was parked at the top of Hunter Moore's long driveway, blocking access. "Seems he doesn't welcome visitors," Wynne said. They parked on the road. Myron and Wynne got out of the car. Everything echoed in the stillness, the car doors closing, their feet hitting the dirt road. Myron had read once that a sound never fully dies, that if you scream in woods like these, the echo will just keep reverberating, traveling, growing fainter and fainter, but never disappearing in total. Myron didn't know whether that was true or not, but if it was, he could imagine a scream here staying vibrant for too long. "What are you thinking about?" Wynne asked him. "How screams echo. You're fun. Remind me never to buy a lake house." They walked past the pickup truck and up the drive. Up ahead, in a front yard overlooking all of Lake Charmaine, Hunter Moore sat on an Adirondack chair. He didn't get up when he spotted them. He didn't wave or nod or show any signs he saw them coming. He just kept his gaze on the horizon, on his perfect view of Lake Charmaine. A whiskey bottle sat on his right. There was a rifle on his lap. "Hey, Hunter," Myron said. Wynne moved to the side a bit, putting distance between him and Myron. Myron got it. Don't give anyone two targets so close together. Hunter smiled up at him. It was the smile of the heavily inebriated. "Hey, Myron!" The sun was in his eyes, so Hunter used his hand to block it. "Is that you, Wynne?" "Yes," Wynne said. "You're back?" "No." "Huh?" "I'm kidding," Wynne said. "Oh!" Hunter's cackle laugh ripped through the stillness. The sound almost made Myron jump. "Good one, Wynne!" Wynne looked at Myron. The look said that they had nothing to fear. There was no way Hunter would be able to reach for his rifle and aim it before Wynne, who was always armed, took him out. They moved closer. "Look at that," Hunter said with awe, gesturing at the vista behind them. Myron looked. Wynne didn't. "Unbelievable, right?" Hunter said. "This spot." He shook his head in wonderment. "It's like God painted this giant canvas himself." "If you think about it," Wynne said, He did. Whoa, Hunter said, like a stoner. Myron wondered whether he had consumed substances other than alcohol. That's so true. Where's Patrick? Myron asked. I don't know. Myron pointed to the house behind him. Is he inside? Nope. How about Nancy? Hunter shook his head. Also nope. Can we all go inside? Hunter kept shaking his head. No reason to. No one in there. Beautiful day like this is to be cherished. We got a couple of chairs if you want to sit and enjoy the view with me. Myron took him up on the offer. This chair, too, was turned to the lake, so that Myron and Hunter sat side by side, both facing the view rather than each other. Wynne stayed standing. We really need to find Patrick, Myron said. Did you call Nancy? She's not answering. Where are they? Hunter still had the rifle on his lap. His hand had been slowly sliding toward the trigger, almost indiscernibly. He needs time, Myron. Can you imagine what his last 10 years have been like? Can you imagine, Wynne said, what Reese's current year is still like? Hunter winced when he heard that and closed his eyes. Myron was tempted to grab the rifle, but Wynne shook him off. He was right. The rifle was not a threat, not with Wynne nearby. If they snatched it away, Hunter would clam up, get defensive. Let him keep his security blanket. You met Lionel, Hunter said. Dr. Stanton, I mean. He says that if you want Patrick to open up, he needs time. We want a quiet, simple life for him. Is that why Nancy is moving him out here? A slow smile came to his lips. This place has always been my solace. I'm third generation here. My grandfather taught my father how to fly fish on that lake. My father taught me. When Patrick was little, I taught him. We'd catch sunnies and trout, and his voice faded away. Wynne looked at Myron with flat eyes and played the air violin. I realize how hard this must have been on you, Myron tried. I'm not looking for pity. Of course not. It's like... Hunter never took his eyes off the lake, never so much as glanced at Myron or Wynne. It's like I've lived two lives. I was one person, a normal, ordinary person, really, up until that day, and then, poof, I was someone else entirely after. Like we all walked through some science fiction portal and entered a different world. Everything changed, Myron said, trying to keep him going. Yes. You got divorced. Right. His hand found the bottle, his eyes still glued to the vista. I don't know, that might have happened anyway, but yeah, Nancy and I broke up. A constant reminder of what happened, the horror, and this person, your life partner, she's just there every day in your face, poking your memory. You know what I mean? I do. The pressure becomes so great. I mean, maybe if there are no cracks to start with, you can get past it, but I couldn't handle it, so I ran away. I lived overseas for a while, but I couldn't move on. The horror, the images. I started drinking a lot. Then I would do AA, get better for a little while, start drinking again, sober up. I kept cycling like that. Lather, rinse, repeat. Hunter held up the bottle. Guess where I am in the cycle now? Silence. Myron crushed it. Did you know about the texts between your wife and Chick Baldwin? The muscles in his face stiffened. When? Interesting response, Myron thought. He looked at Wynne. Wynne found it interesting, too. Does that matter? No, Hunter said. I don't know, don't care, and she isn't my wife. Myron turned toward him. I'm talking about back then, before your son disappeared. Nancy and Chick were close to having an affair. Maybe they went through with it, I don't know. Hunter's grip on the gun tightened. He still stared out, but if the view was offering even an iota of comfort, you wouldn't know it from his face. Who cares? Did you know? No. He said it too quickly. Myron looked toward Wynne. Wynne said, I found Fat Gandhi. That got Hunter's attention. Is he in jail? No. I don't understand. He told me that Reese is dead. Oh, my God, Hunter said, but the surprise in his voice sounded forced. He killed him? No. He never met Reese. He said that Patrick told him that Reese is dead. He said what? Wynne bit back a sigh. Please don't make me repeat myself. Hunter shook his head. So let me get this straight. This psycho-criminal who stabbed and almost killed my son... Hunter looked at Wynne, then at Myron, then back at Wynne. You believe him? We do, Wynne said. Hunter, Myron tried, don't you think Patrick owes the Baldwins the truth? Of course they're owed the truth. Hunter looked stunned now. I'll try to talk to Patrick about this as soon as I can. See what he says. Hunter, it was Wynne. Yeah? I'd like to use your washroom before we leave. Hunter smiled up at him. You think they're inside? I wouldn't know, Wynne said. Either way, I need to urinate. Only Wynne could use the word urinate in a completely natural way, in a non-medical setting. Use a tree. I don't use trees, Hunter. Fine. As he started to his feet, Wynne easily grabbed the rifle from him, which was the closest thing to the old saw about stealing candy from a baby Myron had ever witnessed. I got a license, Hunter said. I can shoot deer on my property. It's perfectly legal. Wynne looked at Myron. Would it be beneath me to note that Hunter is a hunter? Way beneath, Myron said. Har, har. Hunter stumbled toward the house. Come on, he said. Let's get you, urinating and out of here. Chapter 30. Back in the car, Myron asked, How was your urination? Hilarious. They aren't there. He's alone for now. Myron knew that had been Wynne's play with the urination request. So why was he holding the rifle? Perhaps he was hunting. It's his property. He has the right. Perhaps that's his thing. Hunting? Yes, he sits out there on a lovely day, enjoys his view, imbibes his whiskey, then a deer strolls by and he blasts it. Sounds like an awesome time. Don't judge, Wynne said. You don't hunt. I also don't judge. You eat meat, you wear leather, even vegans kill animals, albeit very few of them, when they plow out fields. None of us have completely clean hands. Myron couldn't help but smile. I've missed you, Wynne. Yes, you have. Have you been back in the States at all? Who says I ever left? Wynne pointed to the sound system. I even saw this. Myron had his smartphone hooked up to the car's sound system. They were listening to the soundtrack from Hamilton. Lin-Manuel Miranda was singing with raw, naked pain in his voice. You knock me out. I fall apart. Wait, Myron said. You saw Hamilton? Wynne did not reply. But you hate musicals. I was always trying to get you to go. Wynne put his finger to his lips and pointed again. Shh! Here it comes. What? The last line. Listen. Now. The song dealt with Hamilton's grief after losing his son in a duel. Wynne put his hand to his ear as the company sang, They are going through the unimaginable. That's Brooke, Wynne said. That's Chick. Going through the unimaginable. Myron nodded. This song broke his heart every time. We need to tell Brooke what Fat Gandhi said. Yes. We need to tell her now. In person, Wynne said. Myron was back in the driver's seat. He didn't drive like Wynne, but he could hit the accelerator when needed. They crossed the Delaware River over the Dingman's Ferry Bridge, putting them back in New Jersey. Something else is bothering me, Myron said. I'm listening. Fat Gandhi said he didn't know Patrick, that Patrick didn't work for him. That's correct. Patrick showed up on his turf, got into trouble with some of Fat Gandhi's thugs, and ran away when you intervened. Correct again. Myron shook his head. Then this whole thing has to be a setup. How so? Someone emails you anonymously, he tells you where Patrick is and when he'll be there. You go, Patrick is there, probably for the first time. Because if he had been there before, Fat Gandhi's thugs would have roughed him up back then, right? Wynne considered that. Makes sense. So someone wanted you to find him. Someone sent Patrick, if it is Patrick, to that spot so you would, Myron used his fingers to make quote marks, rescue him. Makes sense, Wynne said again. Any thoughts on who? No thoughts, but there's something else we need to consider. What's that? According to what you told me, Mickey and Emma seem to feel that the boy might not be Patrick. Myron nodded. That's right. When will we have the DNA results? Joe Corliss said he was working on it. Priority 1 should be soon. Suppose this boy isn't Patrick, Wynne said. What's the play then? I don't know, Myron said. Suppose this boy is Patrick. What's the play then? On the soundtrack, Leslie Odom Jr.'s Aaron Burr is furious that Alexander Hamilton has endorsed Thomas Jefferson. A setup makes no sense, Wynne said. And yet, it has to be a setup of some kind, doesn't it? It does, Myron said. Or it doesn't. Deep. In short, Myron said, we still don't know what the hell is going on. Wynne smiled. You'd think we'd be used to that by now. They were 10 minutes away from Brooks when Wynne said, Take a right. Where? Union Avenue. Where are we going? Bear with me. Park here. The name of the shop selling organic coffee and crepes was C.U. Latte. Myron frowned at the pun. Wynne loved it. What are we doing here? A little surprise for you, Wynne said. Come on. The barista wore a hipster beanie and fungus-like facial hair. His poncho had to be made from hemp. C.U. Latte was all in. They ordered 2 Turkish coffees and sat down. What's going on? Wynne checked his phone and pointed to the door. Now! Myron looked at the door as Zora entered in all his sartorial splendor. He wore his Veronica Lake on meth wig, a green monogrammed sweater, and a skirt in a hue Zora would undoubtedly call seafoam. When Zora spotted Myron, he spread his arms and shouted, Dreamboat! Zora's wig was half on, half off. His facial hair would make the barista even greener, though this time with envy. Myron remembered an old clip his father had shown him of Milton Berle in drag. Like that, only less attractive. I thought he was in Finland, Myron muttered to Wynne as Zora approached. He just landed at Newark, Wynne said. Ugh, long flight, Zora said. Zora had no time to freshen up. I must look a fright. Myron wasn't about to touch that one. He rose and gave Zora a hug. He smelled like a male flight attendant's cologne. How long has it been? Zora asked. Too long, Myron said. Or maybe not long enough. Zora is happy to see you. Same, Myron said. Then, getting back on track, he asked, So, what's the deal with Vadalina? Her new name is Sophia Lampo. Did you find her? She works at a fast food restaurant, Dreamboat, in a small town outside of Helsinki. How you say, the middle of nowhere. So I went there. But her boss said she hasn't shown up for work in 3 days. This concerned Zora. So I do some research. She's not home either. I make some calls, old contacts. They can find anything. So did you find her? Myron asked. Zora smiled. It was not a pretty smile. Very soon, Dreamboat. I'm not following. Yesterday, Sophia Lampo took a plane from Helsinki to Newark. She's here, Dreamboat. Vadalina, or Sophia Lampo, is back. Let's start with the obvious question, Myron said, when he and Wynne were back in the car. Why would the au pair come back to the United States? What have we told ourselves since this all began? That something isn't right, Myron said, that we're missing something. Whatever that something is, Wynne said, it's been missing for 10 years. It's been missing since the boys vanished. "So what now?" Myron asked. "Your call." Myron made the final turn onto the Baldwin street. "We need to tell Brooke what Fat Gandhi told you. We don't have the right to keep it from her. She also needs to know about the au pair coming back." "That's a lot," Wynne said. "Too much?" "No," Wynne said. "Brooke can handle more than you can imagine." As they pulled into the driveway, the front door opened. Brooke stepped out. She came to the passenger side of the car and gave her cousin Wynne a long hug. Wynne wasn't normally much for long hugs, but he held on. Brooke put her head on Wynne's shoulder. Neither cried, neither collapsed or anything like that. They didn't move or readjust their arms or pull each other closer. They just stayed there for several beats. "I'm glad you're back," Brooke said. "Me too." When they let each other go, Brooke turned and studied Myron's face. "This isn't good news, is it?" "Nothing definitive," Wynne said. "But not good." "No," Wynne said, "not good." They were about to head inside when another car started down the driveway. Myron recognized the Lexus sedan from Nancy Moore's garage. They all stood and waited as the car came to a stop. The driver's door opened. Nancy Moore stepped out. The front passenger door opened. Patrick Moore stepped out. Brooke stiffened when she saw their faces. Under her breath, she said, "This isn't good news either." Chapter 31. They were back in the kitchen, the place where it all began. Patrick, Nancy, and Brooke all sat at the kitchen table. Myron and Wynne stood off to the side, close enough to hear but not be involved. Patrick sat with his back to the big glass doors, intentionally, Myron supposed. His mother sat next to him and held his hand. Brooke sat across from him and waited. Patrick looked at his mother. She nodded for him to go ahead. Patrick stared down at the table in front of him. His hair was close-cropped, almost shaved. He rubbed his head for a moment before letting his hands drop. "Reese is dead, Mrs. Baldwin." Myron glanced at Brooke. She had steeled herself for this. There was barely a tell. Myron turned to Wynne. His expression was blank, the same as his cousin's. "He died a long time ago," Patrick said. Brooke's voice did not crack. "How?" Patrick kept his head lowered. His hands were folded on the table in front of him. His mother kept her hand on his forearm. "We were taken from this kitchen," Patrick began. "I don't remember a lot of things, but I remember that." His voice was stilted now, a chilling monotone. "The men, they stuck us in the back of a van." "How many men?" Brooke asked. "Brooke, please." It was Nancy Moore. "It's the first time he's been able to speak. Just let him get through this, okay?" Brooke said nothing. She turned her focus back to Patrick. Patrick had his head down. "I apologize," she said with too much formality. "Please, go ahead." "They stuck us in the back of a van," he repeated, almost, Myron thought, as though someone had backed up the teleprompter. "We drove for a long time. I don't know how long. When we stopped, we were on a big farm someplace. There were animals, cows, pigs, chickens. Reese and I, we shared a bedroom in the farmhouse." Patrick stopped, keeping his head down. The silence was suffocating. Brooke wanted to ask something, maybe a million things, but the moment felt bubble-fragile. No one moved. No one spoke. No one dared disrupt the moment. Nancy gave her son's arm a squeeze. Patrick gathered himself and continued. "It was a long time ago," he continued. "Sometimes it feels like a dream. It was nice there, on the farm. They were nice to us. We got to play a lot. We could run around. We got to feed the animals. I don't know for how long. It might have been like that for a few weeks. It might have been like that for a few months. Sometimes I even think it might have been like that for years. I just don't know. It's not like me and Reese kept track or anything." Again Patrick stopped. Myron looked past Patrick, out that back window into the spacious yard, all the way to the trees in the back. He tried to see it as Patrick spoke, the men breaking in here, grabbing the two boys, vanishing into that yard. Then one day, Patrick said, it changed. His tone was more hesitant, the words coming out in a strange, uneven flow. They brought men around, Patrick said. I was abused. Brooke still hadn't moved, still hadn't changed her expression, but it was as though Patrick's words sped up the aging process. Nothing about Brooke changed, and yet Myron could see that she was hanging on by the most brittle of threads. Rhys, he was stronger than I was, braver. He tried to save me. He wouldn't let them do that to him. He stood up to them, Mrs. Baldwin. He fought them. He poked one guy in the eye with a pencil, really got him good, so... Patrick still couldn't lift his eyes from the table, but he managed something like a shrug. They killed him. They shot him in the head. They made me... Patrick's shoulders started hitching. Myron saw a tear hit the table. They made me go with them to this ravine. The monotone was gone now. Patrick's voice was raw, struggling. They made me watch. His mother put her hand on his shoulder. It's okay, she whispered. I'm right here. I saw it. I was there. They just dumped his body into this ravine like it was nothing, like Rhys was nothing. Brooke let out a low moan, a sound unlike anything Myron had ever heard. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Baldwin. And then the tears came from both of them. When Nancy hurried her son toward the door, Wynne stepped in her way. We need to know more, Wynne said. Patrick was sobbing uncontrollably. Not today, Nancy said, pushing past Wynne. Dr. Stanton warned me this might be too much for him. You know the truth now. I'm so sorry. She hurried outside. Wynne gestured to Myron, then moved toward Brooke. Myron quickly followed Nancy and Patrick. When the three of them were outside, Myron shouted, How long have you known Nancy? She spun toward him. What? How long have you known Rhys was dead? What are you... Patrick just told us this morning. Myron rubbed his chin. Odd timing. Patrick was still crying. The tears seemed real, and yet once again, something wasn't adding up. What is that supposed to mean? Nancy asked. Patrick, Myron said, turning his attention to the distraught teen. Why were you in New York City yesterday with Tamron Rogers? Nancy took that one. What business is that of yours? You knew? He needed to get out, Nancy said. Really? So you knew? Of course. How come you took a bus? How come you didn't drive him? That's not your business. He met up with Tamron Rogers. I saw them together. You were following my son? Yep. Nancy put her hands on her hips, trying to look angry, but somehow it came across as more for show. What gave you the right? She snapped. He went out by himself. He started talking to a girl his own age. Don't make it more than what it is. Myron said. He started walking toward them. Your story matches hers. So? Even the outrage over me following them. Tamron Rogers expressed it nearly the same way. You were following my son. I have a right to be angry. Is he your son? Patrick stopped crying almost all at once. What are you talking about? Myron tried staring into the boy's eyes, but again he kept his head down. You both seem to be one step ahead of us, don't you think, Patrick? He didn't reply, didn't look. I confront Tamron Rogers. Suddenly your story matches hers. When and I tell your dad you told Fat Gandhi that Rhys was dead, suddenly you've recovered enough to tell Mrs. Moore about it. Nancy used her remote to unlock the car door. Are you out of your mind? Myron bent at the waist, trying to force Patrick to look at him. Are you really Patrick Moore? Without a warning, the boy reeled back his fist and threw it at Myron's head. Myron was off balance from leaning forward, but this was, after all, an inexperienced teenage fighter throwing a wild punch. All Myron had to do was duck down a bit, not much, not enough to stumble, and let the blow sail harmlessly over his head. The survival instinct, paired with his training, took over, giving him various options for how to counter the attack. The most obvious was to wait another millisecond. With the punch at full extension, the teenager would be completely exposed. Myron's knees were bent. He could pop a shot to the throat, the nose, the groin, but he wouldn't do that. Instead, he stayed in a standing tuck and waited to see how the boy would respond. Using the momentum from his missed punch, Patrick broke into a full run. Myron stood about to give chase when Nancy started pounding on his back with her fists. "Leave my son alone! What the hell is wrong with you? Are you crazy?" Myron weathered the blows for a moment. He stood upright as Patrick disappeared up the driveway and down the street. Nancy ran to her car and opened the door. "Please," she pleaded, sliding in the car and putting it in reverse. "Please leave my boy alone." Myron was about to head back into the house when his cell phone rang. It was his nephew, Mickey. "We got something on Tamron Rogers," Mickey said. "You're going to want to see this." "Where are you?" "Emma's house." "I'm on my way." Wynne stayed with Brooke. He had been filling her in on all the recent developments, the most puzzling for her being the return of her former au pair, Vada Lina, now known as Sophia Lampo. "Why would Vada be back?" Brooke had asked. "I don't get it." Neither did they. 2 stone lions guarded the driveway to the mansion where Emma resided with her mother and grandparents. The gate was closed. Myron leaned out. The security guard recognized him and hit the button. The gate creaked open. When Myron was a kid, the estate had been owned by a famed mafia don, or boss, or capo, or whatever you called the head mobster. Rumor had it that there was a furnace on the property, where the don cremated the bodies of his victims. When the house was later sold, a furnace was indeed found back behind the pool area. To this day, no one knew whether it had been used for his weekend barbecues, or whether those rumors were true. The mansion was enormous and baronial and dark. It looked like someone had combined a medieval fortress with a Disney castle. The estate was sprawling and probably, and this had been the appeal for the current occupants, the most private in the area. There was a helicopter pad, so they could come and go without being seen. The home was in a corporation's name so as to protect the identity of the real owner. Up until a few months ago, even Emma's closest friends had no idea she lived here, or why she kept it secret. There was a lion-head knocker on the door, but before Myron could reach for it, Angelica Wyatt opened the door. She gave him a warm smile and said, "Hey, Myron." "Hey, Angelica." Even though he had known her for years, even acting as her bodyguard at one point, it took a few seconds to see Angelica Wyatt as a person and not a poster or distant celluloid image up on a big screen. What, Myron often thought, must that be like? To be that kind of beautiful and famous that people, maybe even those close to you, always see you through the haze of movie stardom. The famous face leaned in and gave him a kiss on the cheek. "I hear you're getting married," Emma's mom said to him. "Yep." 15 years ago, when Angelica Wyatt had given birth to her daughter, the tabloids had been horrible, following them non-stop, snapping photos with high-powered lenses whenever they'd leave her Los Angeles home, demanding answers about the baby's paternity. Headlines screamed stuff like, "Angelica Wyatt's secret baby shocker," or "We know the dad," and then speculated on some recent co-star or Arabian sultan, or, even in one case, a former British prime minister. The attention grew to be too much for the little girl. She started having nightmares. Angelica Wyatt even quit the business for 2 years, disappearing with the child to France, but that just led to more rumors and other issues, the most salient being that Angelica Wyatt missed making motion pictures. It was her calling. So what to do? Angelica Wyatt secretly moved back to the United States and found this private home in New Jersey. She enrolled her daughter in the public school under the pseudonym Emma Beaumont, though eventually the nickname Emma stuck. Emma's grandparents took care of her when Angelica was on set. No one knew the identity of her daughter's father except, of course, Angelica, not even Emma. "I'm really happy for you," Angelica Wyatt said to him. "Thanks. How are you?" Good. I'm off tomorrow to a shoot in Atlanta. I had hoped Emma might come with me, but she seems distracted right now. You mean with Mickey? I do, yes. They're good kids. This is her first boyfriend, Angelica said. He'll be good to her. I know, but my little girl, is it too cliché to note that she's grown up too fast? Things become clichés because they are apropos. Breaks my heart, Angelica smiled through it. They're all in the basement. You know the way? He nodded. Thanks. Movie posters featuring Angelica Wyatt lined the stairwell down to the basement. Emma had put them up against her mother's wishes. The basement, Emma had explained, was the one place she didn't want to hide anything about her true self. It made sense, Myron guessed. The three teens, Mickey, Emma, and Spoon, were sprawled out on three oversized and upscale beanbag chairs. All three were typing on laptops at a furious pace. Hey, Myron said to them. All three said, Hey, without looking up. Emma was the first to close her laptop and rise. She wore short sleeves today, and Myron could see the extensive tattoo work. The tattoos had troubled Myron at first. As common as tattoos were nowadays, Emma was only a sophomore in high school. Mickey had explained to him that the tattoos were temporary, that a tattoo artist named Agent used her to experiment with different designs, and that they would fade away after a few weeks. Mickey said, Hey, Spoon. Give me a second to organize our findings, Spoon said. Talk amongst yourselves. Emma and Mickey came over to Myron. He had debated getting them involved in something like this. They had already experienced too much of this kind of stuff for one so young. But as Mickey had pointed out, this was what they did. Myron remembered something. Esperanza said you wanted to see her. That was more me, Emma said. It was both of us, Mickey said. We talked to Big Cindy, too. What about? Mickey and Emma exchanged a glance. Emma said, Little Pocahontas and Big Chief Mama. And what about them? They might have been funny in the day, Emma said. They aren't funny now. It's just kitsch, Myron said. They don't mean any harm. It's all just a nostalgic throwback. Esperanza made the same argument, Emma said. Times change, Myron, Mickey added. We just suggested she get in touch with a friend of mine who is Navajo. How did that go? Myron asked. Dunno. They haven't talked yet. Spoon said, I got it. He started waving at Myron. Come here, take a look. Spoon stayed on the enormous beanbag chair. Myron bent down, his bad knee creaking a bit, and collapsed next to him. Spoon pushed up his glasses and pointed to the screen. Tamron Rogers, he began, has almost no social media presence. She does possess a Facebook and a Snapchat account, but she rarely uses either. Everything she does do is set on private. We assume that this is because her father is a wealthy hedge fund manager. The family keeps a low profile. With me so far? Myron adjusted his body in the beanbag chair. It was hard to get comfortable. With you. We know about her summer internship at the television station. We know that she is 16 years old. We know she goes to an elite boarding school called St. Jacques in Switzerland. Spoon looked at Myron. Did you know that in Switzerland it's illegal to keep just one guinea pig? Emma said, Spoon. I did not, Myron said. You have to have them in pairs, Spoon explained. See, guinea pigs are sociable animals, so it's cruel to have only one, or that's what the Swiss think. Emma again said, Spoon. Right, sorry. Anyway, the only photo of Tamron Rogers I could find is her profile pic on Facebook, so I took that image and I put it through an image search. Nothing came back. That's not surprising, of course. Image searches find identical photographs only. Why would someone else have her profile photograph? Still with me? Still with you, Myron said. So I decided to take it to the next level. I located a beta program that uses facial verification software across several social media sites. You may have seen the technology on Facebook. I don't use Facebook. You what? Myron shrugged. But all old people use Facebook, Spoon protested. Emma said, Spoon. Right, okay, so let me explain. Let's say you post a group photograph of your friends on Facebook. Facebook has a new AI software called DeepFace that automatically performs a facial verification search on the photo. Which means, Myron said, which means it will recognize your friends. So you post the picture, and suddenly Facebook will circle a face and say, "Do you want to tag John Smith?" For real? Yes. They do that now? They do, yes. Myron shook his head, happy for his naivete. "Notice," Spoon continued, "that I said facial verification, a technology that recognizes that two images show the same face versus the more common facial recognition, an attempt to put a name to a face. Big difference. So I put the profile photograph of Tamron Rogers through the beta program, beta meaning that it's still being tested, to see what it came up with." "Oh!" Spoon slapped his own forehead. "I almost forgot. I first tried it on Patrick Moore. I was able to get a still frame from his appearance on that television interview. I thought, wow, maybe someone has taken a photograph of him. Maybe I can find something about him and thus Reese somehow." And nothing. Not a single hit. Except, well, let me show you. He clicked the mouse pad on his laptop. A group photograph came up, maybe 20, 25 teenagers. The caption underneath read, "Sophomore class," with names below it. This photograph popped up on an alumni site for students who attended St. Jacques. If you look over here, you let the cursor do the pointing for him. Well, do you recognize that young lady? Myron did. "It's Tamron Rogers." "Precisely, Myron. Excellent work." Myron glanced at Emma to see if Spoon was goofing on him. Emma shrugged, "What can you do?" "And if you look down here at the caption," again Spoon used the cursor, "you'll see a list of first names only. I assume that has something to do with a privacy program at the school, but I can't say for sure. Tamron is the fourth person in on the second row. See?" Myron saw it. It read simply, Tamron. "So, that's what we thought," Spoon said, "at first. In fact, well, I confess, I'm not that great with details. I'm more of a big-picture guy. You know what I mean?" "Assume I do." "Ha! Good one. It was Emma here who... Emma, you want to show him?" Emma used her finger and pointed at the boy standing right behind Tamron Rogers. Myron frowned and bent down for a closer look. "No need to strain your eyes, Myron," Spoon said. "Not at your age. I can zoom in." Spoon started clicking the image until it got bigger and bigger. It was a good shot, taken recently, and with a decent enough camera, but on screen the pixels were starting to blur as he clicked. Spoon stopped. Myron stared again. "So, you think..." Myron began. "We don't know," Spoon said. "I know," Emma said. Myron looked for the boy's name and read it out loud. Paul. The boy in the photograph had long, wavy blonde hair. The prep boy trying to assert his independence. Patrick Moore's hair was stubble, short and dark. Paul, in the photograph, seemed to have blue eyes. Patrick Moore's eyes were brown. Their noses were different, too. Paul's appeared to be smaller, maybe, differently shaped. And yet, Myron wouldn't have spotted it, not on his own. But now when he looked closely, "I know what you're thinking," Emma said, "and I'd probably agree with you. Teenagers look alike. We all get that. I probably wouldn't have thought twice about it, except that this school is small. This sophomore class has 23 students. Patrick Moore goes out and meets with Tamron Rogers. Why? He was lonely. We saw that when we visited him." Mickey nodded in agreement. "It's too much of a coincidence, Myron. I mean, cut the hair. Do something with contact lenses to change eye color. Maybe some kind of surgery on the face. I don't know, but Emma shows this to me. And I'm looking at him, and at first I don't see it, and then..." Mickey pointed at the face on the screen. "I think Tamron's classmate, Paul, is now calling himself Patrick Moore." Myron sprinted back to the car. He got on the phone and called Esperanza. "We need all we can on this Paul kid attending St. Jacques near Geneva in Switzerland. Last name is most important. Parents, whatever." "This won't be quick," Esperanza said. "The school is closed. It's overseas. We have no contacts in Switzerland. Plus, I imagine, this kind of place is pretty damn secretive." Esperanza was, of course, right. "Just do the best you can. Spoon is going to email you the picture." "I already got his email before you called," Esperanza said. Did you know that the most common password for email accounts is 123456? Yep, that would be Spoon. I'm looking at the two pics, one of this Paul kid, one of Patrick at that TV interview. If I look closely, yeah, I can see the resemblance, but would you ever guess Paul and Patrick are the same kid? No, Myron said, but that's probably the point. Oh, I found that fifth-grade teacher, the one who taught Clark and Francesca. Mr. Dixon. Rob Dixon, yeah. Where is he? He still teaches fifth grade at Collins Elementary. I made an appointment for you to see him today at 7:30. How'd you pull that off? I told him you'd heard he was a great teacher and that you were writing a book about your experiences. What experiences? I didn't say. Luckily, Mr. Dixon saw your documentary on ESPN. D-lister fame, baby. It opens doors. After they hung up, Myron called Wynne and told him what he had learned. So the boy is an imposter, Wynne said. I don't know. Still a chance it's just two teenage boys who look alike. And happen to know Tamron Rogers. Seems a stretch, Myron said. Just for the record, both Tamron and Patrick, let's just call him Patrick to make this easier, claim that they just happened to meet at Ripley's. Happened to meet? Yep. Today's youth, Wynne lamented. You'd think they could come up with more credible lies. To be fair, we did catch Tamron unaware. How's Brooke? Blocking, Wynne said, which is probably good. Right now she is very focused on why her former au pair has returned to the United States. Does she have any theories? Not a one. So what's your next step? We keep gathering information, Myron said. Whoa! Slow down with the specifics. Nancy Moore keeps insisting that the boy we rescued is her missing son, Patrick. Correct. So I'm wondering if these photographs of Paul will change her mind at all. Is that where you're headed? On the left, Myron spotted the Moores' house. When he pulled into the driveway, he saw the Lexus sitting in the garage. She was home. I've just arrived. Myron didn't bother with the front door. The garage was open, so he headed toward the Lexus. When he saw the door between the house and garage had been left open, he grew concerned. He leaned his head in and shouted, "Hello?" Nothing. He stepped inside and crossed the kitchen. From upstairs he could hear a rustling sound. He wasn't armed, which was stupid, but so far there hadn't been much need for weaponry. He took the steps slowly. Whoever was upstairs was not trying to hide their movements. Myron reached the top step. The rustling was coming from Patrick's room. He approached the door slowly, sliding his back against the wall, which might or might not be effective in cases like this. It was hard to say. He reached the door, waited a second, took a quick peek inside. Nancy Moore was tearing the room apart. "Hello," Myron said. She jumped at the sound of his voice and spun toward him. Her eyes were wide, almost maniacal. "What are you doing here?" "Everything okay? Does everything look okay?" It did not. "What's wrong?" "You don't get it, do you? You think... I don't know what you think. I was trying to protect my son. He's fragile. He's been through so much. How do you not get that?" Myron said nothing. "Do you know what it took for him to do what he did today? To relive the horror of what happened to him, to Reese?" "It had to be done, Nancy," Myron said. "If it had been the other way, if Reese had come home, Brooke Baldwin would have done what was best for her child, not mine." Nancy stood upright. "Make no mistake about it, a mother protects her child." Whoa. Even at the expense of another? Patrick wasn't ready to talk. We knew that. We just wanted to give him enough time to get his strength. What's a few more days after 10 years? Dr. Stanton was right. It was too much for him. And then, as if it wasn't hard enough to get through that, as if it wasn't hard enough to tell Brooke that Reese was dead, you... She pointed an accusing finger at him. "Go after him. Patrick ran away because of you." "It's not Patrick." "What?" "The boy we brought home. It's not Patrick." "It is Patrick." "His name is Paul." "Get out," she said. "Why don't you get a DNA test, Nancy?" "Fine. If that will get all of you to leave us alone, we will, okay? Now get out, please." Myron shook his head. "I need you to look at these photographs." She looked confused. "What photographs?" He reached out a hand, holding the 2 printouts Spoon had given him. For a moment Nancy didn't take them. She just stood there. Myron moved his hand toward hers a bit more, holding it there until she reluctantly let him pass the pictures to her. "I don't understand." "The group shot was taken at a boarding school in Switzerland," Myron said. She stared at it. "So?" "There is a boy in that picture. His name is Paul. We don't have the last name yet, but we will get it. The second photograph is a close-up." "I still don't understand." Nancy Moore's hands were shaking. She slid the top photograph under the bottom picture. "You can't think." "Paul and your Patrick are one and the same." She shook her head. "You're wrong." "I don't think I am." "There's barely a resemblance." "Do you remember me asking you about Tamron Rogers?" Myron took the photographs back and put the group one on the top. "That's Tamron, the same girl Patrick met with yesterday." "We told you." "Right. They just happened to meet outside Ripley's for the first time ever. I was there, Nancy. I saw them. There was no accidental meet. They knew each other before." "You can't know that from just watching them," she said. But her voice was weak now, defeated. "I just emailed these photos over to a forensic anthropologist named Elise Mervoche. She is going to compare the image of Paul to the tape of Patrick during that interview yesterday. She'll be able to confirm that they are one and the same." She shook her head, but again there was nothing behind it. "Nancy, let me help you." "You... what? Think he's an imposter?" "You're wrong. A mother knows." "You said a mother protects her child," Myron said, trying to keep his voice as even and gentle as possible. "Maybe that want, that need, can also warp perception." "It's Patrick," Nancy insisted. "It's my son. He's finally come home after all these years. I finally have him back." Her eyes lifted. She met him with a glare. "And then you scared him away." "Let me help you find him." "I think you've done enough. It's my son. I know." "I know. He's not an imposter. His name isn't Paul." She pushed past him and headed down the stairs. Myron followed. "When he gets home, we can do a DNA test to shut all of you up, but right now I have someplace to be." Nancy didn't stop. She moved through the garage and out the door. She slid into her car and started it up. "Don't come back, Myron. Don't ever come back." Wynne and Brooke sat in the Baldwin kitchen. The photographs from the boarding school in Switzerland were spread out on the table in front of them. Myron was finishing up the call with Elise Mervoche, the forensic anthropologist. When he finished, Brooke and Wynne looked at him and waited. "In her opinion," Myron said, "it's the same kid." Brooke looked at the photograph again. Myron leaned over her and pointed as he spoke. "This Paul kid cut and dyed his hair," Myron said. "The eye color change is easy with contact lenses. The nose could have been plastic surgery." Brooke just sat there with the photograph in her hand. "And Nancy doesn't see it?" "That's what she said. She insisted it's Patrick." "Do you believe her?" "I believe she believes it." "So she's deluding herself." Myron gave a half shrug. "I don't know." Wynne spoke for the first time. "So we need to figure out who this Paul is. We need to find out where he lives, who his parents are. Esperanza is on that. But it's going to take some time. I'll make some calls overseas, see if we can speed things up." "I don't understand," Brooke said. "Is he an imposter? Is he trying to con the family?" "It's possible." "I read about a case like this," Brooke said. "When you have a missing son, you... Anyway, this was in the late 90s, maybe. A family in Texas had their son go missing when he was 12 or 13. 3 years later, some imposter from France said he was the missing kid. He fooled a lot of people. Myron vaguely recalled the story. What was his motive? I don't remember. Money in part, but I think he got off on fooling people this way. It wasn't his first time posing as someone else. He was warped. The family fell for it in part, I guess, because they wanted it to be true. She looked up. What's going on here, Myron? I don't know. None of this makes any sense. We need to know more. As if on cue, Myron's mobile phone rang. He looked at Wynne. It's Joe Corliss at the DNA lab. Put him on speaker. Myron did just that, laying the phone on the table. Joe? Myron? Joe, I'm sitting here with Wynne. Whoa! Wynne's back? Wynne spoke. Please, tell us the results. Let me cut right to it, Joe Corliss said. And then he said something that surprised Myron. The boy is indeed Patrick Moore. Myron looked at Wynne. Brooke's face lost color. You're sure? The hair samples you provided are from a female. The DNA off the toothbrush belongs to a male. These two people are full siblings. 100%? As close as you can get. The doorbell rang. Wynne started for the door. Thanks, Joe, Myron said. He hung up. He's Patrick, Brooke said. She kept her face steady, but there was a quake working the corner of her mouth. He's not an imposter. He's Patrick. Myron just sat there. So why is Vada back? Why is Patrick meeting with this Tamron girl? It's the other way around, Myron said. What do you mean? Paul isn't someone posing as Patrick. Paul is Patrick. Before he could explain further, Wynne returned to the kitchen with Zora. If Brooke was surprised to see the manly-looking transvestite in her kitchen, she didn't show it. Zora has update on the au pair, Zora said. Brooke rose. Vada? She calls herself Sophia Lampo now, he said. She flew into the country yesterday. She rented a Ford Focus at Newark Airport. Brooke said, so how do we find her? It's already done, Dreamboat, Zora said. All rent-a-cars are equipped with GPS systems, in case the car's stolen. Or you cross state lines so they can charge you more, reasons like that. And they allow you to track it? Zora adjusted his Veronica Lake wig with both hands and smiled. His lipstick was all over his teeth. Allow would not be the word Zora would use, but your cousin's money. It is very persuasive. So where is Vada? Brooke asked. Zora took out his mobile phone. Zora is tracking her on this. He showed them the screen. A blue dot blinked the car's location. Where is this exactly? Zora pressed an icon. The map was replaced by a satellite image. Myron almost gasped out loud. The blue dot was surrounded by green. There was a lake that even from above looked familiar. Lake Charmaine, Myron said. Vada is at Hunter Moore's house. Chapter 32. The fifth-grade classroom looked out over an expansive and complicated playground with slides and swings and forts and pirate ships and tunnels and pipes and ladders. Rob Dixon greeted Myron with a firm handshake and ready smile. He wore a suit of high school vice principal brown and a bright tie Myron usually associated with pediatricians who were trying too hard. He sported a ponytail and a fresh shave. Hi, I'm Rob Dixon, he said. Myron Bolitar. Back at the Baldwin house, they'd decided that Wynne would drive up to Hunter's place on Lake Charmaine, while Myron would keep his appointment with the fifth-grade teacher and stay in the area. I'm going too, Brooke had said. I know Vada. I can help. There was no room for debate in her voice. Please, Rob Dixon said. Have a seat. The desks were those school kind with the chair attached. It took some effort for Myron to squeeze into one. The classroom itself was timeless. Sure, curriculums change, and Myron assumed that somewhere there were hidden signs of modernity, but this could have been his own fifth-grade classroom. Running across the top of the chalkboard was the alphabet, written in capital and lowercase script. A potpourri of student artwork and projects took up the wall on the left. Newspaper clippings were tacked up beneath a handwritten sign reading, Current Events. Oh, I'm sorry, Rob Dixon said. Pardon? I watched the collision, and here I stick you in a chair that has to bother your knee. I'm fine. No, please, take my chair. Myron winced and slid out from the desk. Maybe we can just stand, if that's okay. Sure thing. I'm excited about your research. By the way, and I don't know if this will interest you or not, I've been teaching 5th grade in this very same classroom for 21 years now. Wow, Myron said. I love this age. They're no longer little kids who can't understand deep concepts. They aren't yet adolescents with all the hardship that entails. 5th grade is nicely on the cusp. It's an important transitional year. Mr. Dixon. Please call me Rob. Rob, I bet you're a great teacher. You look like that cool young teacher we all loved, except you're older and probably wiser. But you didn't get all jaded. He smiled. I love the way you put that. Thank you. And thank you. But I may be here under false pretenses. He put his hand to his chin. Oh? I'm here to talk to you about a specific tragic event. Rob Dixon took a step backward. I don't understand. I'm the one who saved Patrick Moore, Myron said. But I'm still trying to figure out what happened to Reese Baldwin. Rob Dixon stared out the window. A boy, Myron guessed was around 6, hopped over to a rope and started to swing on it. The glee on his face, Myron wondered when he had last seen someone so lost in joy. Why come to me? He asked. I had neither as a student, and I probably wouldn't have had. See, we try to make sure teachers don't get siblings. It isn't a rule or anything. The principal just thinks it's not a good idea. You come in with preconceived notions, or, at the very least, a past with the parents. So, even if they had stayed in school, I probably wouldn't have taught either boy. But you did teach Clark Baldwin and Francesca Moore. How do you know that? Clark told me. So? Dixon shook his head. I really shouldn't talk about it anyway. I thought you became a sports agent. That's what the documentary said. After your injury, you went to Harvard Law School and then opened your own agency? That's true. So why are you involved in this? It's what I do, Myron said. But the documentary said... The documentary didn't tell the whole story. Myron stepped toward him. I need your help, Rob. I don't see how. Do you remember that day? I can't talk to you about this. Why not? It's confidential, Rob. A boy is still missing. I don't know anything about that. You can't possibly think... No, nothing like that, but I'm asking you. Do you remember the day the boys went missing? Of course, Rob Dixon said. You never forget something like that. Myron debated what to ask next, and then decided to cut right to it. Were Clark and Francesca here? Rob Dixon blinked several times. What? The day their brothers went missing, Myron continued. Were Clark and Francesca in your classroom? Were they both in school? Did they leave early? Why would you ask that? I'm trying to piece together what happened. After 10 years? Please, Myron said. You said you remember that day. You said you'd never forget something like that. That's right. So just answer me this simple question. Were both Francesca and Clark in your classroom? He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. Of course they were. Why wouldn't they be? It was a school day, a Wednesday, as a matter of fact. Dixon marched toward the back and stopped by a desk in the second-to-last row. Clark Baldwin sat right here. He wore a red basketball shirt from his town rec team. I think he wore that shirt twice a week that school year. Francesca Moore, he moved up to the front row and to the desk on the end. She sat here. She wore a yellow blouse. That was Francesca's favorite color, yellow. She drew yellow daisies on every assignment. Dixon stopped and looked at Myron. Why on earth would you ask that? They were both here all day. All day, he repeated. I got a call from Mrs. Baldwin at 2:30. Brooke Baldwin, yes. She called you herself? Yes, via the main office. She called the principal's office and asked to speak to me. She said it was an emergency. What did she tell you? She said that there had been a personal incident and that a police officer was going to pick up Francesca and Clark. She asked if I could keep the children late until they got there. I said, of course. Did you know about the kidnappings? No, not then. He shook his head. I still don't get why you're here, Mr. Bolitar. Myron didn't know either. He could give him the same song and dance about the clumsy search for the needle in the haystack, but he didn't think there was any point. Did the cop pull up in a squad car? No, he said. It was a female officer. She was in plain clothes in an unmarked car. I don't see the point of this. Tell me about Clark and Francesca. What about them? Do you know that they are college roommates? Dixon smiled. That's nice. Were they close back in 5th grade? Of course. I think their shared experience bonded them. How about before the kidnappings? He thought about it. They were just classmates. I don't think they hung out together or anything. I'm really glad that they had each other, though, especially for Francesca. Especially for Francesca. Needle? Meet my dear friend Haystack. Why do you say that about Francesca? Myron asked. She was going through a bit of a rough patch. What sort of rough patch? This really isn't proper, Mr. Bolitar. Call me Myron. It still isn't proper. Rob, your information is 10 years old. The 5th grade girl with the rough patch is now a college student. The kids trusted me, and I can see why. You're kind, you're caring. You want what's best for them. I had some great elementary teachers when I was a kid. I remember them all. Middle school teachers, high school teachers, not so much, but the good elementary school teachers, they stay in your heart forever. What are you trying to get at? I don't want you to betray confidences, but something went really wrong that day. No, not the obvious. We know that 2 boys went missing, but something else, something big, something that we need to know if we ever want to find the truth. So please, I'm asking you to trust me. Why was Francesca going through a rough patch? Rob Dixon took a few seconds to decide. Her parents, he said at last. What about them? They were going through a rough patch. He stopped. Can you be more specific? Rob Dixon looked back out the window. Her father found some texts on her mother's phone. Myron was back in the car and flooring it to the campus of Columbia University. He had gotten Clark's phone number when he'd last been there, and he dialed the number now. Clark answered on the 3rd ring. Hello? Where's Francesca? Myron asked. We're sitting out on the quad. Don't move. Don't let her move. Why? What's up? Just sit tight. Do not move. There was traffic at the George Washington Bridge. Myron tried the Jones Road shortcut. It saved him a little time. The Henry Hudson was backed up, so he took Riverside Drive down to 120th and parked close to a hydrant. He'd risk the tow. He sprinted up 120th and down Broadway and entered near Havemeyer Hall. Students stared at the seemingly old man running across campus. He didn't care. The campus was laid out before him as he passed the domed and Grecian-columned Low Library, the most prominent building on campus. He headed down the steps, doing a reverse Rocky, passing the sculpture of a seated Athena, and down onto the grassy Southfield East. They were both there, Francesca and Clark, sitting outside on a green Ivy League campus quad. There were, Myron knew, few places like this, few moments in life quite as pure and rich and innocent and protected as being a college student sitting in a grassy quad. Was that real or illusory? Didn't matter. Didn't matter that he was about to shatter all of that for these 2 young people. He was close to the truth now. Francesca looked up as Myron decelerated to a stop. Clark rose and said, What's so important? Myron debated asking them to go inside, to move someplace with more privacy, but they were outside now, no one really within earshot, and there was no time to play around or stall or make it more comfortable for her. He sat across from Francesca in what they used to call Indian style, but, remembering what Mickey had told him, maybe it was now with legs crossed. You didn't have to be the master of deduction to see that Francesca was distraught. She was still crying. Her eyes were red and puffy. "She won't tell me what's wrong," Clark said. Francesca squeezed her eyes shut. Myron looked back at Clark. "Could you give us a minute?" Clark said, "Francesca?" With her eyes still shut, she nodded for him to go. "I'll be at the cafe in Lerner Hall," Clark said. Clark slung his backpack over his right shoulder and trudged away. Francesca finally opened her eyes. When he was far enough away, Myron said, "You need to tell me the truth." She shook her head. "I can't." "It's destroying you. It's destroying your brother. I'm going to find out anyway. So let me help. We can still make this right." She made a scoffing noise and started crying again. Nearby students glanced over, concerned. Myron tried to smile them off, but he imagined that this looked like either an older man breaking up with a younger girl, or, he hoped, a teacher delivering bad news to a student. "I just spoke to Mr. Dixon," Myron said. She looked up at him, confused. "What?" "Your fifth-grade teacher." "I know who he is, but why?" She stopped. "Tell me what happened," Myron said. "I don't understand. What did Mr. Dixon say?" "He's a good man. He didn't want to betray any confidences." "What did he say?" Francesca asked again. "Your parents were having marital difficulties," Myron said. "You talked to him about it." Francesca plucked a blade of grass from the ground. There were freckles on her face. Man, Myron thought. She looked so young. He could almost see her in that classroom, the scared fifth grader, worried about her whole world falling apart. "Francesca?" She looked up at him. "Your father found texts on your mother's phone, didn't he?" Her face lost all color. "Francesca?" "Please, don't tell Clark." "I won't tell anyone." "I didn't know, okay? I didn't know until—" She shook her head. "Clark will never forgive me." Myron shifted so that they were facing each other full on. Someone started blaring music from a dormitory window. The song started with the vocalist letting us know that once he was 7 years old. In seconds, he was 11 years old. Yeah, Myron thought, watching this girl. I get that. "Tell me what happened, Francesca, please." She didn't reply. "Your father found the texts," Myron said, trying to draw her out. "Were you home when that happened?" She shook her head. "I came in a few minutes later." Silence. "Was your brother home?" "No. He was at the little gym. He had a class there on Mondays." "Okay," Myron said. "So you came home. Were you coming from school?" Francesca nodded. "Were your parents fighting?" She squeezed her eyes shut again. "I'd never seen him like that." "Your father, you mean?" She nodded again. "They were in the kitchen. Dad was holding something in his hand. I couldn't see what. He was screaming at Mom. She was covering her ears and ducking down. They didn't even notice I was home." Myron tried to picture the scene. 10-year-old Francesca opens the door. She hears Hunter screaming at a cringing Nancy in the kitchen. "What did you do?" "I hid," she said. "Where?" "Behind the couch in the living room." "Okay. Then what happened?" "Dad, he hit Mom." Campus life was all around them. Students laughed and strolled the grounds. 2 boys with their shirts off threw a frisbee. A dog barked. "My dad, he didn't drink a lot because when he did—" Again Francesca closed her eyes. "It was awful. I had maybe seen him drunk 3 or 4 times, that's all. It was always bad, but not like this." "So what happened next, Francesca?" "Mom called him some horrible names. She ran out into the garage and got in her car. Dad—" She stopped again. "Dad what?" "Dad ran after her," she said. Her words came slowly now, measured. "But before he did, he put down what he was holding in his hand." Their eyes met. "What did he put down?" Myron asked. "A gun."
Myron felt the chill tingle up toward the back of his skull. He ran out the door after her, so I stood up. I came out from behind the couch. Francesca's eyes were wide. She was back in that house now. I started toward the kitchen. The gun was sitting there. On the kitchen table, I was shaking just looking at it. I didn't know what to do. Dad was so angry. He was drunk. I couldn't just leave the gun there.
What did you do, Francesca?
Please, she said. I didn't know until now. You have to believe me. They lied to me all these years. I didn't know until Patrick came home.
It's okay, Myron said. He put his hands on her shoulders. Francesca, what did you do when you saw the gun?
I was scared Dad would use it.
Tears rolled down her cheek.
So I took it. I hid the gun upstairs in my room.
And then? Myron asked.
And then Patrick found it.
Chapter 33. I drive Brooke across the Dingman's ferry bridge. Zora has stayed behind. I can handle this myself. He has matters to attend to. I glance at my cousin. She is staring straight ahead. I remember a family holiday when we were both teenagers. We were staying on our grandfather's estate on Fisher's Island. Fisher's Island is 9 miles long and 1 mile across. It's off the coast of Connecticut, but it's technically part of New York. You probably haven't been. It's not a place that welcomes strangers. One night, Brooke and I got both stoned and drunk on the beach. I have rarely gotten stoned. Myron does not approve, and there are very few other people I trust enough that I'm willing to lose control in front of them. At one point, Brooke suggested we take a night canoe ride. So we did. It was late by then, probably approaching midnight. We paddled and then started drifting. Both of us lay back. We talked about life. Even now, I can remember every word. I stared up at the sky. The stars were out in full force. It was glorious to behold. I don't know whether it was because we were high, or because we were lost in the conversation, or perhaps the beauty of the sky put us in a trance. But suddenly we heard a rushing noise. We bolted upright as the final ferry of the day headed directly toward us. The ferry is large enough to carry both passengers and vehicles from the mainland to our island. It was bearing down on us, nay, it was almost on top of us. There would be no time to paddle to safety. Brooke moved first. She jumped from her spot and tackled me, throwing us both into the water. We started to swim frantically as the ferry came closer. Even now, as I sit in this car, I can feel that bow pass over my back. I've been close to death many times, but that, my friends, was the closest. I didn't react in time. Brooke did. Brooke stares out the front windshield. Reese is dead, isn't he? I don't know. She looks at me. I think he is, I say, but I'm not giving up yet. It's starting to become clear to me. My son is dead. I think I have always known. I always felt it, but I would never rely on a mother's intuition. I rely on facts, not emotion. I turned off emotion when my son vanished 10 years ago. You've been a good mother to Clark. She almost smiles. I have been, haven't I? The best. He's a good boy, she says. He suffered so much over the years. Do you remember my father's funeral? Of course. I was 11, you were 12. I never saw his body. The heart attack was so sudden. My mother wanted a closed casket. There was no point in seeing him that way. That's what everybody told me, but I had a friend, a soldier. She told me that the reason they made sure that they brought home the dead, even risking their own lives, was so that the families could mourn. She said that they needed something tangible in order to move on. We all need to say goodbye, Win. We need to accept it, no matter how terrible, and then move on. I knew Reese was dead, even before Patrick told me, and yet, even though I know I'll never see my boy again, I still have hope. I say nothing. And I hate hope, Brooke says. We reach Lake Charmaine.
Someone had put the sign back in place by wrapping the chain around a post. I simply drive through it. The chain gives way easily. Hunter's pickup truck is still blocking the driveway. I check the rental car's location on the GPS again. It hasn't moved, so the car is still at this house. I take out my revolver, a Smith & Wesson .460, and look at Brooke. "May I request that you stay here until I suss this out?" I ask. Her answer is to open the car door and get out. I figured that it would be a waste of time, but one must make the effort. We start up the driveway, just as I had done with Myron. Hunter is in the same Adirondack chair. The rifle is on his lap. As we move closer, Hunter spots us. He begins to rise, pointing the rifle our way. "Don't kill him," Brooke says. I shoot him in the leg. He drops to one knee. I shoot him in the shoulder. The rifle goes flying. I move toward him now. Brooke is right behind me. Hunter looks up at me, then at Brooke. He is crying. "I'm so sorry," he says. "Where is she?" I ask. "So sorry." I bend down, find the bullet wound on his shoulder, and squeeze hard. He screams, "Where is she?" The front door of the house suddenly opens. A young woman with long hair steps outside. Brooke puts a hand on my arm and nods. "That's Vada," she says. Chapter 34. Myron found Nancy Moore in her backyard. She sat in a gazebo by her rose garden. A mug of coffee was cupped in both her hands. She didn't turn as Myron approached. "I told you not to come back," she said. "Yeah, I know. Have you heard from Patrick?" She shook her head. "Aren't you worried?" "Of course I am. But this is all a big adjustment for him. He needs a little space." "He's been gone for 10 years, Myron said. "I would think space would be the last thing he would want." "Myron." "Yes, I don't care what you think. I want you to leave." Myron didn't move. He just stood there until she looked at him. When she did, he just stayed right where he was, staring at her. Then he said, "I know, Nancy." "Do you know what?" It was a formality. He could see it in her eyes. "Francesca told me. She's confused. Her brother coming home after all these years has messed with her head." "He's dead, isn't he?" "Reese, I mean." "Patrick told you that?" "No. Patrick told us a story. You worked on it with him. It was a good story, too. The best one to tell a devastated mother." "Reese was never harmed," Patrick said. "Reese was happy. He was brave. His death was quick. And before all the horrors started." As I listened to it, I couldn't help but think, how convenient. "Get out!" Myron moved alongside her. "We know Vada is up at the lake." Nancy went for her cell phone, but Myron snatched it before she could reach it. "Give me that back!" "No." "You don't understand a thing," Nancy said. "Oh, I think I do," Myron said. "It's no wonder you convinced Chick not to talk about the texts. You thought it was because it would be a distraction. The cops would start looking at the two of you, thinking, I don't know, you were having an affair. And so one of you went off the deep end or something, but that wasn't it. You knew it all started with the texts. Chick didn't." Nancy Moore rose and started back toward the house. Myron followed her. "So Hunter pulls a gun on you. Did you realize Francesca was the one who hid it? That would also explain why you kept this all a secret from her, or maybe you realized that she was just a kid. She could never keep a secret this big. Maybe you didn't want her to blame herself. If she had just left Daddy's gun where it was, if she had just not worried about what Hunter might do with it." Nancy stopped by the back door. She closed her eyes. "So she hid the gun in her room and Patrick found the gun," Myron said. "I'm not sure when. Francesca didn't know either. A few days later, maybe a week. Did Hunter forget about it? Or was he scared to bring it up? I don't know. Doesn't matter much. Patrick finds it. You and Hunter have been fighting a lot. Maybe Patrick knows that. Maybe he even knows why. Maybe he blames Chick Baldwin or that whole family." "No," Nancy said. "Nothing like that. Doesn't really matter. He's a 6-year-old boy. He has his father's loaded gun. He keeps it in his backpack. He takes it to school with him. One day, maybe even the day he first finds the gun, I don't know. He has a play date with Reese Baldwin. They're playing in that wooded area in the back. That's what you told Francesca, anyway. The au pair, Vada Lina. She isn't watching too closely, or maybe she is, I don't know. She's a scared kid in a foreign country. What does she know? Nancy Moore stood perfectly still. Myron didn't even think she was breathing. I don't know if they were playing a game. I don't know if the gun just went off by accident. I don't know if Patrick was angry about his father. I don't know any of that. But I know that one 6-year-old boy shot and killed another. It was an accident, Nancy said. Maybe it was. How about what happened next? You don't understand, Nancy said. Oh, I think I do. You showed up at the Baldwin house to pick up your son. My guess would be that Patrick shot Reese right before you got there, within seconds, because if he had shot him, say 10 minutes before, Vada would have dialed 911. I heard the gun go off, Nancy said. I parked my car and... Myron nodded. That made sense. You rushed around back. Vada and I... We both started running for him, but... It was too late. The bullet... Reese was shot in the head. There was nothing we could do. Silence. Why didn't you just call the police? Myron asked. You know why. It was our gun. Mine, really. I bought it. Hunter and I. We'd be charged. There are cases. I read about a father who kept his loaded gun under his bed. His 6-year-old found it. He started playing cowboys and Indians with his 4-year-old sister. Shot her dead. The father got convicted of manslaughter and spent 8 years in prison. I thought about that. And I thought about Patrick, yes. He knew we were fighting. He had overheard that, so... Even though he was 6... Suppose someone made something of that. Suppose someone said he didn't do it accidentally, that he killed him on purpose. Patrick would be tainted for life. The kid who murdered another kid. And then you have Chick and Brooke. Do either of them hit you as the forgiving type? So you made it look like a kidnapping. Myron tried to keep his voice steady. She didn't bother to answer. How did you get Vada to cooperate? I told her that the police would say she was responsible. She was supposed to watch the kids. I told her that they'd blame her and put her in jail. I said it was best for her to do what I said, to protect herself. Vada was scared, too confused to argue. By the time she had second thoughts, she was already in too deep. So you clean up the scene. I assume there was blood. Not a lot. And it was in the woods. I cleaned it up. You go over your story with Vada. You tie her up in the basement. You leave and call Brooke. You tell her that you just got to the house and no one is answering the door. That's right. Myron swallowed. Where was Patrick? I took him home. I told him to hide until his father got there. And Reese? Nancy's eyes met his. There was no waver as she said, I put him in a trash can in the back of our garage. The rest was obvious. When Hunter got home, did he try to talk you out of it? Yes. He wanted to confess right away, but by then it was too late. I had already faked the kidnapping. These things, they snowball. It wasn't Hunter's fault. He's a weak man. He couldn't handle what we did. He started to drink. You can probably figure out the rest. It wasn't hard to get a fake ID, though it took some time with the cops around. Hunter kept Patrick at the lake. Eventually we snuck him out of the country. His new name was Paul Simpson. Why did you bring him home now? She shrugged. There were too many close calls. The background checks at the school were getting stricter. People were starting to ask questions. Couldn't keep it up forever. Francesca needed to know her brother was alive, but mostly Patrick wanted to come home, too. So Hunter and I talked about it. We were going to have him just walk into a police station, make up a story about escaping, but that would lead to even more questions. So you sent that anonymous email to Wynne. I knew Wynne had never given up. If he found Patrick, if he rescued him, it would all be more believable. That's what I thought anyway, so I set it up so Wynne would be at King's Cross at the same time as Patrick. It wasn't hard to find a spot. You can look online and find out where teenage prostitutes hang out. That didn't go as planned. To put it mildly, it backfired, she said. When Wynne killed those men, Patrick ran. He called me in a panic. I told him to find a hotel and stay put, but that fat Gandhi found him. So when you tearfully thanked me for saving his life, that wasn't an act. She looked into Myron's eyes, hoping to find solace or kindness, maybe. You did save his life. I messed up from the start. You'll ask, why didn't you do it this way, or why didn't you do it that way? I don't know. I looked at each situation, and I did what I thought was best for my son, and at first it was the right call. Patrick forgot what happened. My sister lives in France. He stayed with her a lot. He loved that school. He was happy. Sure, he missed us, and he missed his sister, and yes, that was one of the tough calls, not telling Francesca the truth, but she wouldn't be able to keep the secret. Not when you're only 10 years old. We tried to comfort her, tried to tell her that her brother really was okay, but of course she suffered. It was a tough choice. She tilted her head. Would you have told her? Myron wanted to say that he would never have started down this path, but he figured that was obvious. I don't know, he said. But you destroyed them all, didn't you? Your husband couldn't live with it. Brooke, Chick, Clark. What you did to them. What you made them suffer through. Reese was dead, she said. Don't you get that? Nothing was going to bring him back. I couldn't save him. I could only save my own boy. Myron felt Nancy's phone vibrate in his hand. He looked at the number and read it to her. It's Patrick! Nancy grabbed it from him and put it to her ear. Hello, Patrick! Myron could hear him crying. Mommy! He sounded so much younger than 16. I'm right here, baby! They know what I did! I want to die! Nancy gave Myron a baleful eye. No, listen to Mommy. It's all going to be okay. Just tell Mommy where you are. You know where I am? No, I don't. Help me, Mommy! Where are you, Patrick? I want to kill myself! I want to kill myself so I can be with Reese! No, honey, listen to me. Goodbye, Mommy! He hung up. Oh, my God! The phone dropped from her hand. Be with Reese, Myron repeated to himself. He grabbed her by the shoulders. Where did you dump Reese's body? She suddenly broke away from him and ran toward her car. Myron followed, overtaking her. I'll drive, he said. Where is he? Nancy hesitated. Myron flashed back to Patrick sitting at the kitchen table. His words had been stilted, monotone, because he was lying. But at the end, Patrick's voice changed, become more emotional. I saw it. I was there. They just dumped his body into this ravine like it was nothing. Like Reese was nothing. Because he was telling the truth. Do you want your son to live or die? Myron shouted. Where is that ravine, Nancy? Chapter 35. According to Myron's app, the ride to the Lake Charmaine area with current traffic would take upwards of 90 minutes. Myron first called the Pike County Sheriff's Office to inform them of the situation. They patched him directly to Sheriff Daniel Yanikos. I'm in my squad car right now, the sheriff said. Where is the boy? Go to the top of Old Oak Road near Lake Charmaine, Myron said. If you walk a quarter of a mile south, there's a ravine. I know it, Sheriff Yanikos said. His name is Patrick. He's there. A possible jumper, he wouldn't be the first. I don't know, but he's threatened suicide. Okay, I'm 8 minutes from the location. How old is Patrick? 16. Nancy had been trying to reach him since they started driving. No answer. What's his full name? Yanakos asked. Patrick Moore. Why does that name ring a bell? He's been in the news. That rescued kid. He's under a great deal of stress, Myron said. Okay, we'll be careful. Let him know his mother's on the way. Myron hung up and called his old friend Jake Corter, another sheriff, this time of Bergen County, New Jersey. He explained the situation and asked for a police escort. On its way, Jake said. We'll pick you up on Route 80. Just keep driving. 20 minutes later, when Sheriff Yanakos finally called back, Nancy Moore gripped Myron's arm so tight he was sure it would leave marks. Hello? Patrick is alive, the sheriff said. For now. Myron let himself breathe. But he's standing at the top of the ravine with a gun pointed at his head. Nancy almost collapsed. Oh, my God! It's calm right now. He's telling us to stay back, so we are. Has he asked for anything? He just wanted assurances his mother was on her way. We said she was. We asked if he wanted to speak to her. He said no, he just wants to see her. He said for us to stay back or he'd shoot himself, so that's what we're doing. How far out are you? As promised, the Bergen County squad cars joined them on Route 80 heading west. Myron pressed down on the accelerator. The police helped him pass the heavy traffic. Half hour, maybe 40 minutes. Okay, Sheriff Yanakos said. I'll call you if anything changes. Myron hung up, made a quick call to Wynne, and then asked Nancy, why did Vada come back? Why do you think? She saw the news reports, Myron said, about Patrick coming home. Yes. She wants to come clean. That's what she says. We, waylaid her. Nothing harmful, we just convinced her to come to the lake to discuss it. Then we took her car keys and asked her to give us a few days, to talk her out of it. And if she didn't agree? Nancy shrugged. I like to think we would have found a way. Hunter was waiting for her when we went up there. Yes. She arrived half an hour after you left. Hunter won't stop Wynne. No, I don't think he will, Nancy said. Can't you please drive faster? And Tamron Rogers? Patrick's girlfriend at school. I thought that he could give her up when he got home. But, you know, teens. Your nephew was right, wasn't he? Teens get lonely, they reach out, so yes, he snuck out. It would have been no big deal, except, of course, you followed him. They crossed the Dingman's Ferry Bridge. The app said they were 8 minutes away. It's over now, Myron said. Yes, I guess it is. But I just need to save my son. That's what this is all about. Then, well, we all move on, don't we? The police will be able to bring up Reese's body from the ravine. They can bury him properly. I checked with an attorney before I started on this journey. Guess when the statute of limitations runs out on the crime of hiding a body. Myron gripped the wheel tighter. 10 years. And think about it. In the end, I hid a body and tampered with some evidence. I told a few lies to the police. Hunter is racked with guilt. He'll take the fall, but we will plead him out, and he'll serve very little, if any, time. So yes, Myron, if we can save my boy, it will all be over. Cold, Myron said. Have to be. None of this had to be. Reese was dead. I couldn't save him. And you think you've saved Patrick? What do you think it did to a 6-year-old boy, making him lie like that? He was only 6. So you just stuffed it away. Your husband became a drunk. Your daughter had to deal with losing a brother. Vada, I don't even know what a mess you made of her life. And Brooke and Chick and Clark, do you have any idea what you did to all of them? I don't need to justify myself to you. A mother protects her child. That's just how it is. So now I get my boy back. We get him help. It's all going to be okay. I'll take him back home. Once he's home, he'll be fine again. Myron made the turn onto Old Oak Road. There were 4 police cars parked at the end of the drive. Sheriff Yanakos introduced himself. We've kept back. He wants his mother. That's me, Nancy said. She started sprinting toward the woods. Myron followed. No, she said to him. Stay back. She trekked into the woods. Myron turned to Sheriff Yanakos. I can't go into it, but we can't leave her alone. I need to follow her. I'll go with, he said. Myron nodded. They hurried in, following her trail up a hill. A bird cawed in the distance. They kept moving. Nancy glanced behind her, still running, but she didn't stop or yell back. She wanted to reach Patrick as soon as possible. A mother protects her child. At the top of the hill, Nancy stopped short. Her hands flew up to her face as though in shock. Myron hurried his step. He veered to the right. Sheriff Yanikos stayed with him. When they reached the clearing, they could see the same thing Nancy was seeing. Patrick had the gun pointed at his own head. He wasn't crying. He wasn't hysterical. He was smiling. Nancy took a tentative step toward him. "Patrick." Patrick's voice was loud and clear in the stillness of the woods. "Don't come closer." "I'm here now," Nancy said. "I'm here to take you home." "I am home," he said. "I don't understand." "Did you really think I stayed in the car?" "What? Honey, I don't know." "You drove me up. You told me to stay in the car and close my eyes." Patrick smiled again, the gun right up against his temple. "Did you think I listened?" "I saw it. I was there. He just dumped his body into this ravine, like it was nothing. Like Reese was nothing." "I killed him," Patrick said, and now a single tear slipped down his cheek. "And you dumped him here. You made me live with that." "It's okay," Nancy said, her voice cracking. "It's all going to be okay." "I see it every day. You think it ever left me? You think I ever forgave myself or you?" "Please, Patrick." "You killed me too, Mom. You threw me down the ravine too. And now we need to pay the price." "We will, honey." Nancy glanced around desperately, looking for any sort of life-preserver. "Look, Patrick, the police are here. They know everything. It's going to be okay. Please, honey, put the gun down. I'm here to take you home." Patrick shook his head. His voice, when he spoke again, was pure ice. "That's not why you're here, Mother." Nancy dropped to her knees. "Please, Patrick, just put the gun down. Let's go home, please." "My God," Sheriff Yanikos said under his breath. "He's going to do it." Myron could see that, too. He debated making a move, sprinting toward the boy, but there was no way he could get there in time. "Home for me is here," Patrick said. "This is where I belong." He cocked back the hammer on the gun. Nancy shouted, "No!" "I didn't call you here to save me," Patrick said. His fingers started to shake as it started to pull on the trigger. "I called you here to watch me end." And then another voice, a female voice, yelled, "Stop!" For a second, everything froze. Myron looked to his left. Brooke Baldwin stood on the other side of the clearing with Wynne. Brooke started toward the boy. "It's over, Patrick." Patrick kept the gun against his head. "Mrs. Baldwin," I said, "it's over." "Stay back," Patrick said. Brooke shook her head. "You were only 6 years old, Patrick. A little boy. It was an accident. I don't blame you. Do you hear me, Patrick?" She took another step toward him. "It's over." "I want to die," he cried. "I want to be with Reese." "No," Brooke said. "There's been enough death and destruction. Please, Patrick, please don't add to my pain." She reached out her hand. "Look at me." Patrick did. Brooke waited until she was sure that he was looking her in the eye. "I forgive you," she said. "You were just a little boy. It's not your fault. Reese, my son, your friend. You wouldn't want this, Patrick. If it was the other way around, if Reese had shot you, would you forgive him?" The gun shook in Patrick's hand. "Would you?" Patrick nodded. "Please, Patrick, give me the gun." The wind seemed to stop. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Even the trees seemed to be holding their breath. Brooke quickly closed the gap between them. Patrick hesitated, and for a second Myron thought that he was still going to pull the trigger. When Brooke reached out and took hold of the gun, Patrick fell into her arms. He let out a guttural cry and started sobbing. Brooke closed her eyes and held him. "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry." Brooke looked out over the ravine, the place where her son had lain for the last 10 years. She gripped the boy tighter, and finally, Brooke broke down and cried with him. They stood there, the two of them, the mother of a dead boy holding firm to the boy who had killed him. Nancy Moore approached carefully. Brooke looked at her over Patrick's shoulder. Their eyes met. Nancy mouthed the words, "Thank you," and Brooke nodded at her. But she didn't let go of Patrick. She didn't let go until the boy finished crying. Chapter 36. The police brought up the body 4 hours later. Hunter Moore was in the hospital for his bullet wounds. He would be okay. Vadalina was fine. She had told Wynne and Brooke the entire truth. That was indeed why she'd come back. Hunter might be up on kidnapping charges. It was hard to know for sure. Nancy Moore had been taken into custody, but her attorney, Hester Krimstein, got her out on her own recognizance within the hour. Nancy had been correct. No serious charges would stick to her. Wynne said, "You should go home." Myron shook his head. He had stayed this long, he wasn't leaving yet. The body was just bones now, but the clothing was intact. Brooke walked over and stroked the red sweatshirt and the blue jeans. "Reese's," she said. Brooke stood without another word and started back toward her car. Wynne followed, but she shook her head. "You go back with Myron. I need time alone, and I need to tell Chick myself." Wynne said, "I don't think that's a good idea. I love you," she said, "but I don't really care what you think." They watched Brooke walk away with her spine straight. She got into the car and drove away. "Come on," Wynne said. "Let's go home." Wynne drove. A few minutes into the ride, Mickey called for an update. Emma and Spoon were with him. "It's over," Myron said to his nephew. "You found Reese?" "He's dead." Myron could hear Mickey tell Emma. Then he could hear Emma cry. Wynne parked the car in the garage behind the Dakota. When they entered the apartment, Therese threw her arms around both of them. They stayed like that until Wynne's phone buzzed. Wynne excused himself and said good night. Myron looked deep into Therese's eyes. "I can't wait to marry you," he said. He took a long, hot shower. Therese joined him. They didn't speak. Not yet. Not tonight. They made love. It was fierce and raw and perfect and maybe even healing. Myron didn't so much fall asleep in his fiancée's arms as pass out. He didn't dream. He just stayed in her arms for a long time, an hour, maybe 2. And then the small chill started running up his spine. "What is it?" Therese said. "What's the matter?" "The gun," Myron said. "What gun?" "Patrick had a gun," Myron said. "What happened to it?" Epilogue. 3 months later. You are perhaps hoping for a twist and a happy ending. You are thinking that perhaps a mistake was made, that the body did not belong to Reese Baldwin, that somehow Brooke and Chick got their child back. But sometimes there is no twist, and many times there is no happy ending. This is, however, a happy day. 2 weeks ago, I threw Myron perhaps the most legendary bachelor party of all time. How legendary? Let us say that we hit 4 continents. Myron, of course, was a very good boy. It is how he always is. I, you'll be happy to note, was bad enough for the both of us. So too were Esperanza and Big Cindy.
What, you say, women at a bachelor party? Times change, my friend. Today I am dressed in tails as Myron's best man. It is odd. Myron has always dreamed of this day, of marrying the love of his life and settling down and starting a family. The gods have, alas, had other plans for him. I, for one, have never encouraged such thinking. I don't really get the whole love thing. Or I didn't. Myron is more than my best friend. The youngsters call what we have a bromance, and perhaps that is apropos. I love Myron. I need him happy. I have missed him over the past year, though I was often closer than he knew. The night he saw Hamilton, I was 3 rows behind him. When he found his brother Brad in that horrible place, I was not that far away. Just in case. I love him, and I want him to be happy. There have been other loves in his life, most significantly a woman named Jessica. But Therese is different. You notice it when you are with them. They are one thing apart from another. They are something entirely different, entirely spectacular when they are together. Simply put, if everything is a chemical reaction, and I believe it is, these two compounds combine to make an ecstatic whole. I knock on the door. Therese says, "Come in." I enter. "Well," she says, spinning toward me, "have you ever seen a beautiful, happy bride in a wedding gown? Then you know." "Wow," I say. "You sound like Myron." I pick up her hand and kiss it. "I just wanted to wish you well," I tell her. "I want you to know that, like it or not, I will always be there for you." She nods. "I know." "And if you break his heart, I'll break your legs." "I know that, too." I kiss her cheek and leave the room. You're probably wondering about the repercussions after Reese's body was discovered. Allow me to fill you in. As you saw in the news, the entire truth has come out. No one, of course, is charging Patrick with any crime. As Brooke said standing over that ravine, he was just a child. The Baldwins, Brooke, Chick, and Clark, are as well as one might expect. Myron likes to say that even the ugliest truth is better than the prettiest of lies. I don't know whether that is always the case, but it seems to be the case here. They know now. Brooke buried Reese in our family cemetery outside Philadelphia. They mourn, and continue to mourn. But they also move on. Clark remains a close friend and college suite-mate of Francesca's. She didn't know the truth until Patrick returned. Nancy Moore felt that her daughter would be strong enough and mature enough to handle it then. She was, of course, wrong. For the most part, Hunter Moore has recovered from his injuries. There will be charges, mostly related to his half-hearted kidnapping of Vada Lina. I don't know how that case will turn out. We will have to see. As for Nancy Moore, law enforcement is actively searching for her, though I doubt that she is much of a priority. After her release on her own recognizance that night, Nancy Moore, it seems, took a page out of her son's playbook and disappeared into the ether. Law enforcement insists that they will not rest until she is found. Myron asked me whether we would search for her, too, if we would help bring Nancy Moore to justice. No, I told him. We did this for Brooke. If it is over for her, then it is over for us. But enough about that. Myron is getting married today. I stand up on the dais with him. When his bride-to-be turns the corner, when he first gets a look at Therese in her gown, I hear Myron mutter, "Wow." I smile and say, "I concur." Therese's parents are deceased, so Myron's father, Al, escorts her down the aisle. I look out over the crowd. They are all in this room. Big Cindy is the maid of honor. Esperanza comes out from behind the curtain. She will very soon officiate this wedding. Oh, you may be wondering about the little Pocahontas and Big Chief Mama situation. They both decided to retire their former Native American aliases. Some may mourn that, not Esperanza. Giving a culture too much respect, Esperanza told me, never killed anyone. Times change, my friend. Myron takes a deep breath. I see the tears form in his eyes. I put my hand on his shoulder to give us both strength. He reaches over and acknowledges the gesture.
we wait for Myron's father to bring Therese to the dais. Much of the ceremony passes in a haze for me. When Esperanza gives me the signal, I hand Myron the ring. We are best friends, and I love him. But, sorry, sometimes the prettiest lie is better than the truth. So, I will never tell Myron, though I wonder whether he suspects it. The morning after Reese's body was found, he called me on the phone. "Where's the gun?" he asked. "What?" "Patrick's gun." "Oh," I lied. "The police confiscated it." There was a hesitation, maybe a second too long, before he said, "Okay." You may think I kept the gun. I didn't. If you remember, Brooke was the one who took the gun from Patrick. The call I got when we arrived back at the Dakota, that was from Brooke. I went back and helped her clean up. The police were able to find enough remains to identify, even 10 years later, my cousin Reese. That will never happen with Nancy Moore. No one will ever find the slightest trace. Oh, there will be sightings. An anonymous call will claim they saw her on a beach in Fiji. Someone else will say she's living in a monastery in the hills of Tuscany. Or perhaps someone will spot her in London, where Zora is currently paying a visit to a certain rotund pedophile. Nancy Moore will forever be in hiding, a mystery. The ceremony ends. I watch Myron lift Therese's veil. He pauses because I know him, you see. He wants to drink in this moment. He gets how rare this moment is, and he wants to stop and appreciate it. He just wants this moment to last. Myron is good about that. I don't know if I agree with what Brooke did, or if I would have done the same in her place, but it is not my place to question her judgment. Nancy Moore robbed her not only of her only son, but also of closure. She did immeasurable damage to Chick and Clark. She knew the truth for 10 years and let her suffer. She took Brooke's life away from her. She took Brooke's child, her baby, and tossed him like so much trash down a ravine. You tell me what the price should be. I also confess that perhaps I'm being sexist. If Nancy Moore had been a man, if Hunter Moore had found the body that day and thrown a 6-year-old away like so much refuse, ruining lives, destroying my cousin, her husband, her young child, would I think twice about making him pay? One wonders. Brooke and I are alike. We share a bond. Perhaps that bond is not always a good thing. Did Brooke act in a moment of understandable maternal fury? Would Brooke do it again if she had time to reconsider? I don't know. But I wonder about Nancy Moore's decisions, too, as a mother. Was Nancy Moore initially afraid to go to the police because she would be charged with a crime, or because her son would be forever scarred, or because Chick had some dubious business associates who might do her harm? Or did Nancy understand that the most dangerous rage might come from a mother who lost her child? But now I watch Myron step on the glass. The crowd stands and roars its approval. Myron Bolitar, married man, runs down the aisle with his loving bride. I will spare you the tears and hugs and congratulations. I will skip instead to the opening song. It is, well, gag-worthy, though typical of Myron. The DJ calls Myron and his mother Ellen for the mother-son dance. Ellen Bolitar is shaking from Parkinson's, but Myron takes his mother's hand and leads her to the dance floor. No one moves. The music starts. The song Ellen chose is by Bruce Springsteen. I listen as the boss aptly croons, "If I should fall behind, wait for me." We all watch them dance. I glance across the room and see the faces. Big Cindy is crying hysterically. She does not hold back her plaintive wails. It is lovely. Myron's sister has flown in from Seattle. His brother Brad and Brad's wife Kitty are back. They stand next to Mickey and Emma. Mickey and Emma are holding hands. I try not to stare. The DJ says, "Will everyone please join Myron and his mother Ellen on the dance floor?" Myron's dad Al escorts Therese to the dance floor. Young Mickey takes over from Myron and dances with his grandmother as only an awkward teenager can. Esperanza finds Myron. These two, my dearest friends, share the dance. Others join in, filling the floor. I am content to watch. This, my friends, is life. Hey, I'm not above a gag-worthy sentiment now and again. I feel her standing next to me before she speaks. You're Win, right? I turn to Emma. I am. My mom told me to say hello. I manage a nod. Tell Angelica I say hello back. She looks at me a long second, then she says, Do you want to dance? She has no idea what this means to me. Or maybe she does. I thought that her mother would never tell her. Did she? Or could it be that Emma is incredibly perceptive and intuitive? That could be in her genes. It is hard for me to find my voice. That would be lovely, I managed to say. We move to the dance floor. We face each other. She puts one hand on my shoulder and the other hand in mine. We start to dance. At some point, Emma moves closer. She rests her head on my shoulder. I barely move. I barely breathe. I just want this moment to last.
We hope you have enjoyed our presentation of Hömë by Harlan Cöbën, performed by Stephen Weber. Performance copyright 2016 by Brilliance Audio, all rights reserved. For further information concerning this program or other Brilliance Audio titles, please call the following toll-free number, 1-800-222-3225, or visit our website at www.brillianceaudio.com. No part of this recording may be played for an audience or reproduced in any form. It may not be streamed, downloaded, broadcast, or copied without written permission. Address all inquiries to Brilliance Audio, P.O. Box 887, Grand Haven, Michigan, 49417.